Chapter 1170. The Black Jiao of the Northern Frontier, or simply the Northern Frontier, could be said to have a reputation. However, it was only a reputation. Even the Heavenly Martial World's overlord, the guardian of the Heavenly Martial World, had people like Wei Li and Lin Yuan as enemies, let alone the Northern Frontier, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than the other empires, but was still some distance away from becoming a first-rate force. The Southern Demonic Beast Range couldn't be compared to the Hengduan Mountain Range and the Endless Sea. However, with the Southern Demonic Beast Venerable holding the fort, it could be said to have suppressed the Xinjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire for many years. In terms of military strength, the Xinjiang Empire directly gave up on resisting the Southern Demonic Beast Range, and the Chuyan Empire's trump card, the Chuyan Tiger Soldiers, had even put in 120% of their energy to keep an eye on the Southern Demonic Beast Range. In terms of economic strength, they had also been using the Gold Squandering Den and the Xinjiang Empire to harvest all kinds of resources from the Chuyan Empire and the Xinjiang Empire. Perhaps the Southern Demonic Beast Range couldn't compare to the Xinwu Empire and the Deadwood Empire, but the confidence they had cultivated in the Xinjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire made it impossible for them to run away in front of the Northern Frontier. Furthermore, 11 of the 12 demonic pillars of the Southern Demonic Beast Range had come. With such a lineup, it didn't matter who the leader of the Northern Frontier was. Unless the Black Jiao personally came, they had the confidence to put up a fight. Taking a step back, if the Black Jiao personally came, they could just turn around and leave. Because that way their strategic goal would have been successfully achieved. The relationship between the Southern Demonic Beast Range and the Northern Frontier could be said to be like fire and water. It wasn't that the Gold Squandering Den and the Chuyan village couldn't enter the Northern Frontier to harvest resources, but the Southern Demonic Beast Range's previous actions were equivalent to declaring war on the Northern Frontier. The relationship between the two sides had reached a point where only one side would be able to rest. Perhaps there was still room for discussion before, but after the Hengduan Mountain Range incident, the Black Jiao had already announced that even if their Lord Demon Venerable was willing to lower himself to mend the relationship with the Northern Frontier, with the Black Jiao's temper, he would flip the table. There weren't many people in the world who were fools. The Northern Frontier's current strategy, but after the other empires saw the Northern Frontier and Empire's confrontation with the Deadwood Empire, they would definitely relax their guard against the Northern Frontier. This was a very reasonable thing. No one demonic beast range had the Northern Frontier. Therefore, when the Northern Frontier restricted themselves, they would only be happy to see it happen. Perhaps only the Deadwood Empire would be unhappy. What the Southern Wilderness Demonic Beast Range did was to force the Northern Frontier to give up on the most difficult path and attack the Xinjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire, which were easier to take down. As for how to make the Northern Frontier change their strategy, it was very simple. As long as they provoked the Northern Frontier would definitely mobilize a large-scale army, high-level cultivators, and demonic beasts to fight back. However, once things developed to this stage, it would be very difficult for the Northern Frontier to turn around and attack the Deadwood Empire. This was because war was a battle of resources. Food, equipment, and population were all necessary factors. No one doubted that the Northern Frontier's wealth could support one or two nation-destroying wars. No one even doubted that the Northern Frontier had enough resources to completely destroy the empires. However, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time to turn these resources into cash. Starting a war with the Deadwood Empire at the Northern Frontier was actually the best decision. First, it was to restrict him as much as possible so that the other empires would let down their guard against the Northern Territory. But strictly speaking, the Withered Tree Empire was a bone that he had to gnaw on, and it was already tough enough now. If he left the Withered Tree Empire for last, who knew how powerful the Withered Tree Empire would become after absorbing the remnants of the other empires that had failed? Second, after starting a war with the Deadwood Empire, the rhythm of the Northern Frontier's war would definitely change from a blitzkrieg to a protracted war. Without a few years of effort, they would not be able to devour the Deadwood Empire. Even if they did, it would take a lot of time to digest the remnants of the previous dynasty and deal with the local sects and clans. Just like Lei Qiuxing, who had established his country for decades, he still could not completely wipe out the remnants of the Jiao clan. What Lin Yuan wanted to do was even more extreme. He did not want to devour the previous dynasty's imperial family. Instead, he wanted to suppress all the clans and wipe out all the sects. Once they entered a protracted war, the Northern Frontier would have an endless supply of soldiers and all kinds of resources. After completely devouring the Deadwood Empire, they would turn around and attack the other empires. Although it was not as simple as an adult beating up a child, it would greatly reduce the difficulty. What the Southern Wastelands demon vein was doing now was to forcefully drag the northern frontier into a blitzkrieg, forcing the northern frontier to devour the Azure River Empire and the Deadwood Empire. Then they would become the public enemy of all the empires in the Jianghu world. At that time, it would be much easier for them to form an alliance to suppress the northern frontier. In any case, I will not retreat. Yushi looked at Fei Xian with disdain and said coldly, "If that Black Jiao is willing to play, I will play with him until the end. Let's see what kind of almighty being that Black Jiao is." First, he killed third brother, then he plotted against a demon venerable. Yushi rolled his eyes and looked at Qinyu. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Although the Southern Wastelands 12 demon pillars was a collective name, it did not mean that they were all as close as brothers. On the contrary, the Southern Wastelands 12 demon pillars were divided into various groups due to their different personalities and territories. Not only were their relationships not harmonious, there were even a few demon pillars who had personal grudges against each other. Fei Xian knew how powerful the northern frontier was, so he was not willing to fight head-on with the northern frontier. However, Yushi was different. Whether it was in terms of ability or personality, Yushi was a hawk through and through. Previously, when the Black Jiao suddenly attacked the Rising Cloud Empire, it was Yushi's doing. Later on, the Rising Cloud Empire stabilized and did not continue to be encroached upon by Yushi. However, it was an indisputable fact that the Rising Cloud Empire had been ruthlessly bitten off a piece of meat. However, to a dove like Fei Xian who valued harmony, Yushi's actions were undoubtedly self-destructive. After all, although the Rising Cloud Empire had established the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to guard against the Southern Wastelands demon vein, in reality, the relationship between the two parties had always been good. Otherwise, the Southern Wastelands demon venerable would not have been able to request the Rising Cloud Tiger soldiers to attack the Northern Frontier's army. However, Yushi took advantage of the Black Jiao's attack to destroy the Rising Cloud Empire's imperial court and the demon venerable's seclusion to recuperate. He did not even discuss with them in advance and privately mobilized his troops to attack the Rising Cloud Empire. The subsequent Southern Wastelands demon vein's military forces were all contributed by the other demon pillars when they knew that the relationship between the two parties was irreparable. However, in the end, the only one who attempted to annex the Rising Cloud Empire was Yushi alone. Chapter 1171. It was the same for the Chuyan dynasty and it was the same for the northern frontier? Although Fei Xian had opinions about the Chuyan dynasty, he would not voice them out directly. This was because there was no right or wrong in this world. The one with the bigger fist was the reason. This time, the Chuyan dynasty was almost completely annihilated. It was normal for the southern wilderness demon range to take a bite out of them, but what about the northern frontier? For some reason, the sky demon did not provoke the northern frontier at all. Instead, he wandered around the empty south and eliminated the sects and clans that had the strength to take root in the south of the Jianghu dynasty. From a strategic point of view, the Sky Demon's actions were completely for the northern frontier. When the northern frontier turned around and devoured the Sky Demon, they could smoothly take over the entire Jianghu dynasty's territory. Moreover, there would not be a second voice that would hinder the development of the northern frontier. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier had quelled the chaos in the Hengduan Mountains and forced the Shuangjian dynasty to a dead end. It was a complete victory. With this victory, no matter who the northern frontier faced next, they would definitely be irresistible in the early stages. What was the difference between provoking the northern frontier at this time and courting death? Even if they provoked the northern frontier for the sake of a strategic victory, anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was just an excuse. Everyone knew that once the northern frontier went west, they would definitely devour the Qinjiang dynasty and the Chuyan dynasty to minimize their future enemies. How could the southern wilderness demon range that was sandwiched between the two dynasties be spared? Not to mention that it was the southern wilderness demon range that was provoking the northern frontier this time. Fei Xian could not comment on the strategic layout of the southern wilderness demon range. However, he knew very well that once he did that, the southern wilderness demon range would definitely be destroyed. Idiots like Yushi probably thought that it was the demon venerable's confidence and most likely wanted to bite off a piece of meat from the northern frontier. However, they never thought that with the demon venerable's strength, he could go anywhere he wanted. Whether it was the Hengduan Mountains or the Endless Sea, he could live very well. But what about them? They were just a bunch of ordinary demonic beasts. Even if the 12 demonic pillars were at the demonic king realm, after offending the Black Flood Dragon, the Endless Sea and the Hengduan Mountain Range would be benevolent if they didn't help the Black Flood Dragon. As for the other human empires, there was no place for demonic beasts like them. Fei Xian stared at Yushi with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Invincible? You really dared to say that? Don't you know how to think before you open your mouth? If the northern frontier really invades the west, the Xinjiang Empire and the Chuyan Empire will definitely perish. How can we, the southern wilderness, be spared? With just the 11 of us demon kings, do you expect the demon venerable to defeat the Black Jiao?" At the same time, the 12th Ji Qian, who was the youngest of the 12 demon pillars, also said, "Lord Demon Venerable defeated the Black Jiao? If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then he wouldn't force the northern frontier to attack us. To put it bluntly, Lord Demon Venerable just wants to drag the northern frontier down with him. If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then why not take advantage of the northern frontier and the Withered Wood Empire to lead us to backstab the northern frontier?" At this point he paused and added, "Of course what I'm saying is that even if the southern wilderness and the northern frontier perish together, our Lord Demon Venerable's strength is still there. Without the southern wilderness he can still live comfortably. There were never so many fools in the world. When you treat others as fools, then you are the real fool." Now, the Demon Venerable clearly wanted to give up on the southern wilderness and drag the northern frontier down with him. At this juncture, their Lord Demon Venerable was in seclusion recuperating. It was obvious that he did not want to get involved. When the northern frontier got angry, they would all be abandoned. 12, you think so too? Yushi glared at Ji Qian fiercely and growled, "I don't know what's so great about that Black Jiao to make all of you so afraid. Yes, I admit that the northern frontier is developing very quickly, but the northern frontier might not be able to defeat us southern wilderness. Why are all of you so pessimistic before the war even starts?" Fei Xian sneered and said, "It's not that we're afraid, it's that you're too stupid. You didn't see clearly what kind of trap was hidden behind this matter. Only you foolishly jumped into it." Yushi's eyes turned cold. The killing intent on his body suddenly skyrocketed. Bang! Qinyu suddenly slammed the table heavily. He glanced at Yushi, Fei Xian and Ji Qian's faces and said, "I understand what you mean. Stop arguing." Qinyu looked like he was playing the peacemaker, but in fact, his actions were no different from declaring his position. Because the southern wilderness army was still attacking the northern frontier, and the 12 Fei pillars were still here. Qinyu's words were to shut Fei Xian and Ji Qian up. "Boss," but Fei Xian stared at Qinyu, unwilling to give up. Qinyu narrowed his eyes and coldly interrupted Fei Xian's words. "You're right. The Demon Venerable is using us and the southern wilderness as pawns to fight the northern frontier. Yushi really believed that we could defeat the northern frontier. That's really stupid. But then again, aren't you and Ji Qian just as stupid?" Fei Xian and Ji Qian looked at each other. They didn't quite understand what Qinyu meant. Since they already knew that the Demon Venerable was going to use them as pawns, were they still going to follow the Demon Venerable's wishes? It was wrong to do so, so how could it be wrong not to do so? Qinyu sighed and said helplessly, "Don't forget that we're still the 12 Fei pillars of the southern wilderness. Above us are the Demon Venerables. If you quit now, yes, you can make the northern region ignore us. But do you think you can protect the southern wasteland demon veins just like that? Why, do all of you think that the Demon Venerable is already dead?" Qinyu's words froze the atmosphere. Thinking about it this way, it was really wrong to do or not to do it. If they didn't provoke the northern frontier wouldn't attack them now. But how would they explain it to the Demon Venerable when they returned? The Demon Venerable's strength was there for all to see. Not to mention Fei Xian and Ji Qian, even the 12 Fei pillars. Oh, now it's the 11 Fei pillars. They might not be able to defeat the Demon Venerable even if they fought together. Then, aren't we dead meat? Minyu, the 5th-ranked Fei pillar, asked with a trembling voice. Instantly all the Fei pillars fell silent. It was as if no one dared to face this bloody question. Should they choose to live a little longer or die immediately? How could they solve such a question? Chapter 1172. Qinyu narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at the despairing demon pillars and sighed once more. He could not help but feel disappointed. After all, it was not a good experience to be teammates with a bunch of pigs. After a moment of silence, Qinyu said slowly, "You can't say that. With our current position, it's true that we'll die whether we do it or not. But what if we change our position? Everyone here is a demon king. Even in the northern frontier, we'll be strong. If we join the northern frontier Black Jiao and get accepted, we'll win this game." What kind of joke is this? Yushi suddenly stood up in a somewhat irritable manner and roared, "Submit to that Black Flood Dragon? Boss, do you know what you're saying? Even if we're willing to join, that Black Jiao has to be willing to accept us. What we're doing now, isn't it just forcing the northern frontier to die? If you want to join the northern frontier now, isn't it just a matter of time before we die? Ji Qian's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of understanding, and he said with a bright idea, I understand. I get it. Boss, you can actually win this game. Amazing. Qin Yu's plan was not complicated. Therefore, Ji Qian understood Qin Yu's warning after a moment of deduction. They were now on the side of the 12 demon pillars of the southern wasteland, so they naturally had to work for the southern wasteland demon range. Whether they were willing or not, it could even be said that the demon venerable was actually aware of their plans. However, as long as they did not immediately surrender to the northern region, the demon venerable could not possibly deal with them now. This was because everyone would have the idea of surrendering to the enemy at a critical moment. It was just that some people did it, while others gave up on the idea in an instant and kept spurning it. Thinking of betraying and actually betraying were two completely different concepts. As for whether they would join the northern frontier, that would depend on how the northern frontier handled this matter. If the northern frontier could hold back their anger and continue with their previous strategy, the southern wilderness demon mountain range would gain some advantage in the short term. However, in the near future, the northern frontier would definitely defeat the southern wilderness. Under such circumstances, if the 11 demon pillars were to join the northern region, it would be equivalent to standing on the side of the victor. Even if they would have some negative labels on them, the chances of the northern region accepting them at this time was undoubtedly very high. What would happen in the future could be dealt with in the future, but whether or not they could survive now depended on this move. Shallow. It was simply too shallow. At this moment, Ji Qian could not help but despise his previous plan. No wonder boss sighed. On the other side. In the prince's mansion of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan saw the anxious Zhao Guangchong. He grinned and said, I already know your purpose. Li Zhong's idea is my idea. When you go back, prepare to build your army in the west. I will personally supervise the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Works to fulfill the conditions that Li Zhong promised you. No, teacher. Zhao Guangchong looked more and more anxious. He said with threatening gestures, the west is really in a mess now. There are constant killings every day. Outside the city, there are killings between the northern battlefront army and the southern wilderness demon army. Inside the city, there are killings between the gold squandering cave, the gentle village, and the demon emperor association. Every day at dawn we have to deal with at least 1,000 corpses. Moreover, the southern wilderness has been making a lot of moves recently. The killings between the two sides are getting more and more intense. If we don't have enough power to kill them directly, the demon emperor and the imperial brocade guards will not be able to cover this up. Now that the northern frontier had dealt with the Hengduan mountain range and the Shuangjin dynasty, those who were hiding in the dark gradually stopped. If the news that the southern wilderness kept harassing the northern frontier was spread out, these people would definitely be active again. At that time, the northern frontier would be dragged into the quagmire again. The conditions that Li Zhong promised? That was not even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. Lin Yuan looked at Zhao Guangchong with a smile, as if he didn't realize the seriousness of this matter at all. After a while, Lin Yuan said, we are clear about this matter. We know how to deal with it. Trust me. Just do as Li Zhong said. It won't be long before you get a group of strong reinforcements. Then just guard the door of the northern frontier well. Strong reinforcements? Zhao Guangchong's breathing became a little faster. He couldn't understand Lin Yuan's meaning at all. After all, the situation of the northern frontier was right there. Li Zhong would definitely fulfill the conditions that he promised him. However, those things that Li Zhong didn't agree to, Li Zhong wouldn't do anything either. Then where would the strong reinforcements come from? However, as a member of the first batch of the Blackwater Army and the lieutenant who had the best development in the Blackwater Army, Zhao Guangchong naturally saluted Lin Yuan with a northern frontier military salute. His anxious expression eased a lot as he walked out of the door. Even so, Zhao Guangchong was still thinking. Where did the strong reinforcements come from? Qinjiang dynasty? Impossible. The Qinjiang dynasty could be said to be in a terrible fix. The Baixing Navy had to patrol the Wei River constantly to guard against the Sky Demon's attacks and the demonic beasts that were causing trouble along the Wei River. They also had to snipe the refugees who tried to escape into the Qinjiang dynasty. Who knew how many northern frontier agents and people possessed by the Sky Demon were among them? The other armies of the Qinjiang dynasty couldn't be counted on. The Yunmeng Navy, which was as famous as the Baixing Navy, had to guard against the southern wilderness and the Chuyin dynasty. They even had to keep an eye on the situation in the Hengduan mountain range and the Endless Sea. Compared to the Baixing Navy, the Yunming Navy, which was much more low-key, was the foundation of the Qinjiang dynasty. Once something happened to the Yunming Navy, the Qinjiang dynasty would be one step away from being destroyed. Other armies? The Qinjiang dynasty didn't have any other armies. The other armies of the Qinjiang dynasty were only slightly stronger than the militia. The Chuyan dynasty? That was even more impossible. Everyone knew that the Chuyan dynasty couldn't even fend for themselves now. Not to mention taking the initiative to attack other forces, the new emperor of the Chuyan dynasty would probably be laughing in his dreams if they could reclaim the territory that the southern wilderness had taken advantage of. The Chuyan dynasty was not far from being destroyed now. They were only slightly stronger than the Shuangjin dynasty. At least, although their lives weren't in their hands, they could still struggle a little. Whether the Shuangjin dynasty would be destroyed or not depended on whether the northern frontier was willing to lift a hand and let this reckless little brother off. Once the northern frontier wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. As for the matter of strong reinforcements, the more he thought about it, the more impossible it was. However, after Lin Yuan agreed, Zhao Guangchong actually had an inexplicable confidence. Chapter 1173. After Zhao Guangchong left, the smile on Lin Yuan's face gradually disappeared, and he regained his indifferent expression. He turned to look at Li Zhong, who was standing not far away, and said in a low voice, "How's the matter with Frost Mirror Khan?" Li Zhong bowed slightly, cupped his hands and said, "The Reflection Frost dynasty is like a grasshopper after autumn. They won't be able to jump around for long. Both of us are well aware of this. Recently, no Reflection Frost barbarians have tried to break through our defense line. I heard that they've already eaten all their food and warhorses. They've long run out of ammunition and provisions. Those who survive now are all cultivators with good cultivation. Otherwise we would have to wonder what they're eating." Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he raised his voice slightly and replied, "I mean, tell me something I don't know." Li Zhong's expression turned awkward. He apologized in a low voice and said, "I've already sent a message to the other side. As long as the Frost Kaghan is willing to end his own life, we will let the rest of the people go. I'm guessing that right now the Frost Kaghan is trying to convince the Frost Kaghan to end his own life. According to the plan, we will throw these people into the Hengduan mountain range, and use them as a bargaining chip for the one you think highly of, to become the Beast Master. According to Yi Bujia's information, including the heads we have sent over, that one has about a 70% chance of winning. If he loses, it means that he and his tribe did not contribute at all in the plan to massacre the Frost Mirror grassland." As his voice fell, Li Zhong saw Lin Yuan squinting his eyes slightly and his heart sank. After a while, Lin Yuan said with a dark look, "I don't want to tell you that the king cannot be humiliated, but this situation is not what I want to see. To put it simply, Li Zhong, you have made a very simple matter complicated." Lin Yuan paused, and when he saw Li Zhong's thoughtful expression, he continued, "I don't want to see the officials trying to persuade Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide. I only care about the result and the resources we have invested. Originally, you could have let those people kill Frost Mirror Khan, and then find an excuse to send them into the Hengduan mountain range. But now, if Frost Mirror Khan is really forced to commit suicide, do you think this king will let them go or not?" Hearing this, Li Zhong's forehead was already covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. There was a difference between letting them go and letting them go. If the cavalry of the Shuangjin dynasty were to be released back to the grassland, their fate would not change. But in Lin Yuan's plan, Silver Thunder's brain was supposed to be counted as part of the calculation, so it would be hard to say who would be the one to blame. As for whether to let them go back to the Frost Mirror grassland or put them into the Hengduan mountain range for internal digestion, that would depend on whether the Shuangjin barbarian forced Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide in exchange for their lives, or if Frost Mirror Khan was killed by them. Li Zhong took a deep breath, and a trace of worry flashed across his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Your subordinate is at fault. I thought everything was under control, so I made such a mistake. Please punish me, Dragon King." A mistake of this level was definitely not punishable by death. After all, the lives of those barbarians were in the hands of the northern region, and it was only a momentary lapse of judgment from the northern region. At most, it was just that the northern region did not have the right to do so, and it would cause some criticism. But the northern frontier was, after all, a force guarded by demonic beasts. Some criticism was nothing. But this kind of low-level mistake was not something he, Li Zhong, should have made. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and the atmosphere became solemn. After a while, he said faintly, This king has sensed the opportunity to break through. For the next period of time, you will be in charge of all the affairs of the northern frontier. When this king returns from the endless sea, I hope everything will go smoothly. Yes. Li Zhong lowered his head, not daring to look into Lin Yuan's eyes. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. The most important thing was that trust was a very fatal thing. When it existed, the people who trusted you were willing to bet everything that you wouldn't let them down. But when there was a crack in the trust, then all the trust would collapse in a very short time. For example, this time, previously when Master Wu came to look for him, he did not dare to say that he had not been tempted. After all, the current Li Zhong could be said to be the king of the northern region. Even though he had always been very careful to play the role of the puppet king, in the countless sleepless nights he had tossed and turned, he had fantasized more than once how great it would be if all the power now belonged to him alone. Now, a great opportunity was in front of him. If he cooperated with those people to kill or expel Lin Yuan, then he, the nominal king of the northern frontier, would become the real king of the northern frontier. But in the end, he still made the most reasonable choice as usual, which was to take the initiative to report this matter to Lin Yuan. He did not hide anything at all and even speculated that those people were not from the Heavenly Gate Guardians. It seemed that he had gained Lin Yuan's trust. But did Lin Yuan really trust him? In the face of such a temptation, he did not believe that he could remain unmoved until the end. Moreover, if he was in Lin Yuan's position, he would have already started looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. But now the incident with Frost Mirror Khan was like a signal. A signal that he was challenging Lin Yuan's authority. After all, this was not a small matter. Because if there was a mistake in the operation, then the plan against the Frost Mirror Grassland and the Hengduan Mountains would be half lost. Whether Li Zhong's behavior was intentional or not, it would obviously make Lin Yuan unhappy. At this time, Lin Yuan took a step back and handed over the entire northern frontier to him. However, he did not say when he would return. Therefore, Li Zhong could easily deduce that this was a trial for him by Lin Yuan. If he could make up for his mistakes and complete Lin Yuan's plan, or even better, he would be able to keep his life. Otherwise, Lin Yuan should be looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. It was about time for him to choose a place with good feng shui for himself. Yes. Li Zhong spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said in a loud and clear voice, "This subordinate will definitely look after the north." Lin Yuan replied softly. Li Zhong did not know if it was a psychological effect, but he seemed to see a hint of mockery in Lin Yuan's eyes. Chapter 1174. The next day early in the morning, Lin Yuan had already set off from the northern frontier, following the Wei River all the way south towards the Endless Sea. 3 months had passed. Even if the Outer Sea demonic beasts and the dragon clan of the Four Seas had a blood feud, they should have finished fighting by now. Even if they had not completely settled their grudges, both sides should not have the energy to continue fighting. Because this was not just a battle for revenge, but a battle that would determine the future overlord of the Endless Sea. Regardless of whether it was the Outer Sea demonic beasts or the dragon clan of the Four Seas, it was impossible for them to go all out, or even to the extent of perishing together with the other party. Then, since the war was over, it was time to reap the rewards. Especially in these 3 months, the construction of the City of Trade should have been completed. Even if there were still some details missing, it would not affect the business of the City of Trade. If he did not take advantage of this time to reap some profits, what was the point of building the City of Trade? Of course, even if the war in the Endless Sea had not ended, Lin Yuan was not worried that he would be dragged into the quagmire. After all, after building the City of Trade, Lin Yuan would be able to use the teleportation portal to receive customers from all over the world. He would also be able to connect the trade route between the Sky Martial Continent and the Endless Sea. As long as Lin Yuan was willing, he would be able to obtain the identity of the biggest logistics supplier in the Endless Sea anytime. At such a juncture, no one would dare to offend him. Because with an additional set of resources, the speed of recuperation would increase by a little, and the speed of recuperation would determine when the next war would start or who would lead it. After Lin Yuan left, Li Zhong then sat down on the stone chair in the king's mansion's courtyard with a bitter face, staring at the pond at the side, lost in thought. Facts had proven that if there were rules, there would be loopholes. Even though the Northern Frontier had organizations like the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the Demon Emperor Association, but at the end of the day they could not be omnipotent. Luo Su was able to hide from the eyes and ears of the Demon Emperor Association and the Embroidered Uniform Guards to join forces with Lei Fan. If Li Zhong was willing, he could actually do something similar as well. However, it was meaningless to do such a thing because the northern region never belonged to him. The ruthless people who gathered in the northern region weren't here for him either. Most of them had no choice but to flee to the northern region because of their strength, talents, and other reasons. They had offended powerful people in their previous places and had no choice but to flee to the northern region in order to survive. In the current cultivation world of the Sky Martial world, just by casually asking around, one would know that there were many strong cultivators who had appeared in recent years. But the most outstanding one was still the Black Jiao from the northern frontier. In less than 3 years, the Black Jiao had quickly replaced Kong Xiang as the #1 man. This was something that even the Demon Venerable had not been able to do. After all, the Demon Vein of the southern wasteland was not far from Mount Shaoyi. If the Demon Venerable had not crossed paths with Kong Xiang, that would be strange. So, the ruthless people came to the northern frontier not only for a stage where they could display their strengths, but more importantly, they wanted to obtain the protection of the northern frontier. Obviously, Li Zhong had no way to protect these strong cultivators who had defected to the northern frontier. When the time came, even if these people did not come out to fight with him for the control of the northern frontier, they would still choose to leave the northern frontier. At that time, without the support of these people, and with the connection to the Hengduan mountain range broken, the northern frontier could really be said to be useless. It would not take long before it returned to the way it was in the hands of the Xinwu dynasty, becoming a desolate land. When his sister thought of this, Li Zhong could not help but sigh. His family's Dragon King was truly a person who could reach the heavens. The current northern frontier was a piece of land that was worth drooling over in everyone's eyes. But only in Lin Yuan's hands did the northern frontier become like this. Once the power of the northern frontier was lost, unless the other party was like Lin Yuan, possessing the identity of a demon beast, valiant strength, and a mysterious background, they would be able to maintain the characteristics of the northern frontier. It was just like how no matter what policies Lin Yuan introduced, the credit would be forcefully given to Li Zhong. Demon beasts were also extremely distrustful of humans. The main reason why the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was able to prosper was because the person in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was Lin Yuan. Otherwise, with the nature of businessmen pursuing profits, they would have already begun to follow the trend of the northern frontier, imitating the model of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and entering the Hengduan mountain range. But until now, Li Zhong had never heard of any Chamber of Commerce doing the same thing as the northern frontier. After a moment of silence, Li Zhong lightly waved his right hand. A wave of Gang Qi shot out from his palm, directly stirring up the pond beside him. "Your Highness, why did you call for me?" After another 2 breaths of time, a middle-aged man dressed in a long black robe climbed out of the pond. But the strange thing was that there was not a single trace of water on the man's body. Li Zhong's eyes narrowed slightly as he said slowly, "The Dragon King has already left the northern frontier. Before that, he also released Yi Belan and Li Xian. Now the northern frontier looks strong, but anyone with a discerning eye can see that once we start a war with the Deadwood dynasty, the northern frontier will quickly weaken into an empty shell. Those guys will definitely choose that time to stir up trouble. Currently, we do not know much about the enemy, but Lei Fan and Luo Su will definitely be part of the troublemakers. Go and keep a close eye on them. Once they do anything, immediately send a message back." "Yes." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Without waiting for the middle-aged man to leave, Li Zhong spoke again, "Also, get that spy to start working. He must find an excuse to cut off Frost Mirror Khan's head before he collapses mentally and commits suicide. Don't make things difficult for me." This time, the middle-aged man did not agree readily. After a moment of silence, he slowly raised his head and said, "Your Highness, this is not what you promised us. If Frost Mirror Khan dies, the Frost Mirror grassland will be leaderless. When that time comes, the tribes will fight and kill each other. We will not have a chance to enter and harvest. Do you think this is appropriate?" "Fufu," Li Zhong let out a long breath and said with a gloomy face, "The Frost Mirror grassland is a place that the Dragon King has his eyes on. Whether Frost Mirror Khan dies or not, there will be no accidents. Your previous plan is destined to fail. My personal advice to you is to sincerely cooperate with us. In the future, the benefits you will reap will be far greater than what you have now." The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. In the end, he shook his head and said, "You can't even fulfill the benefits you promised us. How can you make us believe in the greater benefits you promised us? If this is all you want to say, then forgive me for taking my leave. We will no longer be involved in the northern frontier." Li Zhong responded to the middle-aged man with a cold laugh. Chapter 1175. Lin Yuan stopped in the middle of the Wei River, his eyes gloomy. After a while, he grinned and sneered, "A bunch of traitors, do you really think I don't know about your existence? If it wasn't for Jiao Jinshuan's request before he died, I would have killed all of you long ago. The last chance is right here, so do you cherish it?" The middle-aged man's surname was Jiao, but he wasn't from the Jiao Wuing branch. The Xinwu dynasty, which had been established for tens of years, had two big branches, Lei Qiuxing and Lei Qiuming. Counting the inheritance of the Lei family, for example, Lei Fan, although he had the bloodline of the Lei family, he wasn't a real royal family. He was only slightly stronger than the average nobles, otherwise he wouldn't have been sent to the northern frontier to gain experience and gain merits. In the Wanjian dynasty, which had an even longer history, the Jiao family could be said to be a big family among the big families. Not only did the Jiao family have the bloodline of the Jiao family, but there were also many families that were bestowed with the family name of the emperor after making great contributions. After the fall of the Wanjian dynasty, although those meritorious officials still had connections with the Jiao family, they all changed back to the family name of their ancestors. The so-called Jiao family was just a general name. If they were to be divided, there were probably no less than 100 families with the surname Jiao. In this chaotic world, it was very normal to place bets separately. However, the remaining members of the Jiao clan did not only want to rely on someone who could become the ruler of the dynasty, they also wanted to rebuild the Wanswords dynasty and restore their former glory. Jiao Wuing and Lei Fan cooperated to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. The middle-aged man cooperated with Li Zhong to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. These people had more or less harmed the interests of the northern frontier. According to Lin Yuan's logic, they should have been sentenced to death. But Jiao Jinshan had contributed to the northern frontier. Before he died, he set out his last wish. Even if Lin Yuan rejected it directly, he still gave these Jiao family members a chance to change. It was just as Li Zhong thought. Lin Yuan had never believed that anyone could replace his position on the northern frontier. If such an existence really appeared, he would only be able to obtain a desolate border. It was true that the northern frontier was his base, but only in his hands would the northern frontier be the northern frontier of today. Therefore, Lin Yuan never believed that anyone could take the northern frontier away from him. At the other side, the middle-aged man frowned slightly. He took half a step back and said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, I don't quite understand what you mean. We all know that the Dragon King is powerful. Since the Frost Mirror grassland is already in the hands of the Dragon King, we won't fight for it. Why is your Highness trying to scare me with a sneer? Bluff you? You're not worthy." Li Zhong's face turned cold. He stared at the middle-aged man with a gloomy face and said coldly, "I'm talking to you nicely. Do you want to fool me? Then I'll make it clear to you. At this juncture, I don't know how many people are watching the northern frontier. There are even people in the dark who have come to me for cooperation. But at this time, the Dragon King has sent Yi Bilan and Li Xan away, and handed the northern frontier to me. Do you think that the Dragon King has no idea of your secret tricks at all, and he did this out of trust?" When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment before he raised his hand and continued, "If you insist on doing this, then I won't try to persuade you any further. However, when you're about to die, don't forget that I've already done all I can for all of you." The middle-aged man smacked his lips and suppressed the idea that had just appeared. Because Lin Yuan's series of actions clearly showed that he wanted them to express their attitude. Would they help the northern frontier complete the plan and then live peacefully in the northern frontier? Or would they continue to do things their own way and wait for Lin Yuan to directly destroy them? Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan had already retracted his gaze and dived into the Wei River. What the middle-aged man's final choice was actually not important, because the moment he stopped, it meant that he had understood the consequences of his choice. At this time it was up to him. Even if Lin Yuan appeared, he could not change his mind. He only needed to put this matter aside and wait for a result. If they made the wrong choice, Lin Yuan would not hesitate to activate the previous arrangement and directly send these people to hell. On the other hand, Lin Yuan did not mind giving them a chance to integrate into the northern frontier. However, entering the Endless Sea this time was much easier than the last time. Last time, the Wei River was filled with the Baixing Navy, but now the situation had changed. No matter how powerful the Baixing Navy was, they did not dare to continue blocking the Wei River. This was because since the rise of the northern frontier, the only overlord of the Wei River was no longer the Baixing Navy. Although the Northern Frontier Navy did not have an independent organization in terms of elite, they were not inferior to the navy of the Azure River Empire. In addition, with the Sky Demon's occasional harassment, they did not dare to block the entire Wei River. If they became the barrier of the northern frontier for no reason, wouldn't they die in vain? Sneaking along the Wei River, Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. After all, the Wei River was never a peaceful place. In a small section of the water, there could be several clans of aquatic monsters fighting for control. After all, the Baixing Navy's military exploits were here. Zhao Xiang was also a famous general who could fight on the water like Yan Xingqi and Lei Qiuxing. Him leading the Baixing Navy to patrol the Wei River was more of a deterrent to the Shenwu dynasty. Their real job was to patrol the Wei River, to ensure the balance of the aquatic monsters' ecological chain, to protect the living environment of the people along the river, and to ensure that the monsters were not too rampant. However, the Wei River now was like a ghost town. Lin Yuan walked for nearly 100,000 kilometers, but the number of aquatic monsters he saw did not exceed 1,000. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan smiled and murmured, "It seems that the war in the Endless Sea is still going on. These monsters have all run to the outer sea and are trying to take root there. Although the Wei River is vast, it is still much smaller than the Endless Sea. Those monsters from the outer sea have been robbed. It seems that the dragon tribe of the Four Seas is not having a good time." The closer he got to the Frost Mirror grassland, the narrower the Wei River became. On the contrary, the downstream near the territory of the Qinjiang dynasty was the place where the aquatic monsters had to fight for survival. Even in this place there were not many monsters, which could only mean that they had all entered the Endless Sea. With such a large number of aquatic monsters entering the Endless Sea, who knew how many territories of the monsters from the outer sea they had devoured? Moreover, they had not been defeated until now. It could only mean that the monsters from the outer sea did not care about them at all. They were now wholeheartedly fighting the dragon tribe of the Four Seas. Chapter 1176. At that moment, a strange feeling came from the unseen world. Lin Yuan suddenly raised his head and looked towards the west. Countless desolate world creatures were like Lin Yuan. They all turned to look in the direction of the strange movement. No one knew what had just happened, but one thing was for sure: something incredible had been born. On the Endless Sea, on a lone island that looked like a lone star, Hamba slowly raised his head. Hitorigami slowly raised his head. His grayish-white eyes trembled slightly. After a long time, he murmured with a hoarse voice, "This world can actually set up the grand formation of heavenly stars. Could it be that the legend is true?" Jimeng. Waize. At that moment, the Qianwu world seemed to tremble. It was broad daylight, but endless starlight sprinkled down from the sky, as if it was going to cover the sky and earth. 365 stars lit up, releasing incomparably resplendent rays of light. In addition, there were over 10,000 slightly dimmed stars revolving around these 365 stars as if they were resonating with each other. Shortly after, streams of star energy descended, instantly enveloping the Martial Heaven continent and the Endless Sea. The stars in the sky also began to move along a mysterious trajectory. Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of fear as he softly muttered. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation was created by Bai Zhe, one of the 10 great demon commanders, during the ancient demon court. Once it was set up, it could cover the sky and earth, instantly separating them into two worlds. Even the flow of time would change. As the saying went, a day in the sky is a year on earth. This was to describe the profoundness of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. And this was only the most basic use of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation. The most terrifying part of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation was its defense. Once it was set up, except for the original Gate of Life, there were no flaws. That was why after the Heavenly Court set up the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars Formation, there were 4 gates of heaven in the north, south, east, and west. Even Taishang and Yuanshi had to go through one of the 4 gates of heaven to enter the Heavenly Court. Such a powerful formation was naturally not something that could be casually set up. First, it required special materials to refine 365 greater Heavenly Cycle Star banners and 14,800 lesser Heavenly Cycle Star banners. Then, it would be arranged with them as the foundation. Among them, each great Heavenly Cycle Star banner had to be a middle-grade spiritual treasure, and the minor Heavenly Cycle Star banner had to be a low-grade spiritual treasure. If they were placed in the system's ranking of treasures, even a minor Heavenly Cycle Star banner would have a rating of B-. The Killing Blood Sword in Ichi Immortal Yuyuan's hand was almost at this level. It was stronger than a great Heavenly Cycle Star banner alone, but it was still limited. After all, spiritual treasures and magic treasures were not the same thing. Spiritual treasures were existences that surpassed magic treasures by a level. Above that, they would reach the level of ultimate treasures. Although spiritual treasures were also divided into innate and acquired treasures, the materials used to set up the formation were not differentiated. Even an ordinary ultimate treasure would not be able to withstand the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation did not exist in the Jianghu world. After all, this formation was created by Baizhe. According to legends, Baizhe was a great demon that knew astronomy and geography. Even among the mythical creatures, Baizhe's knowledge was at the top level. Such a talent was obviously not something that could be nurtured in a small world. Then, this Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was undoubtedly the work of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Star banners required by the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation were irreplaceable. The quality and quantity had to meet the standards. For example, if a person's strength exceeded his physical fitness, then every time he punched, it would bring a great burden to his body. He might even die from the backlash. This was the same principle in the art of formations. The more powerful a formation was, the more materials and rituals it required. This was because every time a formation was activated, it would cause damage to the formation itself. To repair it was almost equivalent to setting up a new formation. When choosing materials, the longer the better. After all, no matter how rich one was, one could not waste money like this. Even the richest people in the world did not have the habit of throwing their money into the sea, right? It was hard to say whether the Jianghu world had the materials to make star banners. But even if there were materials, it was impossible for the other party to make so many star banners in such a short time. Even when Hao Tian, who was favored by Hongjun, established the Heavenly Court, he had used a lot of stock from the ancient demon court when he rebuilt the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. This was because the materials and time required to make enough star banners were unimaginable. If he had to start from scratch, it would be too late by the time he finished. Heaven Emperor. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly flashed. He had to admit that Hongjun was indeed steady, accurate, and ruthless. Now that the Jianghu world was about to be repaired, it could be said that the three paths of heaven, earth, and man were indispensable. The position of the human king had not been decided yet, and the god of the underworld was already in Lin Yuan's pocket. Hongjuan's subordinate had actually been able to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor. This made Lin Yuan somewhat interested in this Heaven Emperor whom he had yet to meet. Lin Yuan was very clear that they were both outsiders. At least he had a physical body from the Jianghu world. Therefore, it was even more difficult for the other party to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor than it was for him. However, the other party had been hiding for so long, and had been secretly plotting all this time. It was obvious that he had already obtained the position of Heaven Emperor. Therefore, this Heaven Emperor was undoubtedly a powerful figure. But why did he set up the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation? Lin Yuan focused his mind and pondered. However, he realized that the other party's actions were like the puzzling behavior of humans. It was hard to understand. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was second to none in terms of its defensive ability. Once the formation was set up, there was no other way in other than the four heavenly gates. No external power could break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. During the Great Shaman War, how did the Shaman tribe break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation? To put it simply, it was the 12 Grand Shamans who used a formation to break through the formation. To put it in more detail, it was the 12 Grand Shamans who used the 12 Divine Fiends formation to condense Pangu's true body to break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. Pangu's true body was a power that could split the heavens and earth, or even destroy the heavens and earth. To the eldritch wastelands of the Great Thousand Worlds, the great god Pangu, who could break through 10,000 techniques with his power, was not an invincible existence. His power was enough to create chaos in the eldritch wastelands, but it was not enough to destroy the eldritch wastelands. However, if it was the Jianghu world, not to mention the power of the great god Pangu, even if a sage were to descend, he would be able to cause the eldritch wastelands to explode. Then the question was the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation unbreakable? Chapter 1177. In the Jianghu world, the Great Heavenly Cycle Star formation was truly an unbreakable existence. Even if they could explode with enough power to destroy the Great Heavenly Cycle Star formation, the result would be the destruction of the Jianghu world. That would be equivalent to dragging everyone down with them. Rather than calling it breaking the formation, it would be more accurate to call it self-destruction. Of course, If they did not directly break the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation, there would naturally be other ways to break it. For example, if they directly walked into the formation through the 4 heavenly gates, then the defenses outside would naturally become mere decorations. However, the problem was that the 4 heavenly gates were not the weak points of the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. They were specially made for the deities of the heavenly court to go to work. Correspondingly, the security of the 4 heavenly gates was also extremely terrifying. Just like the one in the Chaos World, other than the southern heavenly gate that was clearly made easy for the monkeys, the other 3 heavenly gates were placed there. It could be said that anyone who tried to barge in would die. Even if a sage tried to barge in, he would probably have a layer of his skin peeled off. When the 2 armies faced off against each other before they had even clashed, the other side had already withdrawn into their turtle shells and hung up a no battle sign. What kind of freaking operation was this? Could it be that they wanted to outlast their opponents to death? Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became strange. That was because the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation had another use, which was to change the flow of time. As the saying went, a day in the heavenly court is a year on earth. It was because of the existence of the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. A year for the deities of the heavenly court was a year for the living beings on earth. Calculating it this way, the deities of the heavenly court were able to send away 1 or 2 generations of mortals in 3 months. Even the most powerful heroes would be as weak as porcelain dolls in the face of time. Once the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation was set up, it could be said to cover the sky and cover the earth. Even the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was unable to pass through the Great Heavenly Cycle Star Formation. However, what did that matter? What kind of existences were the deities of the heavenly court? They were immortals whose physical bodies had been destroyed, but whose true spirits existed on the investiture of the gods. What they needed was the power of incense. No matter how much spiritual chi they absorbed, it was just a decoration for a pure cultivator of the divine path. Those great chi practitioners who were recorded as immortals did not rely on the power of incense, but they did not live in the heavenly court either. Instead, they went to work and were picked up by special immortal cars. They were treated much better than the workers who crowded buses and rushed to the subway. When they were not on duty, they would stay in the mortal world and cultivate. Moreover, every 3,000 years, the heavenly court would organize a peach banquet to increase the lifespan of these great chi practitioners with spiritual items. Of course, ordinary heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals could only live for 300 to 500 years even if they were recorded as immortals. Therefore, the peach banquet had nothing to do with these small fries. Could it be that the celestial emperor had set up the heavenly cycle star formation to exhaust them to death? But who could he outlast? The power of incense itself could be converted into any unit of energy, including but not limited to cultivation and lifespan. Those old immortals in the heavenly martial world were using the power of incense to extend their lifespan, which was why they were able to live until now. Of course, this was because they took advantage of the fact that the 3 realms were incomplete. If the netherworld was established, regardless of cultivation or realm, as long as one did not reach the golden immortal realm, the netherworld would have the right to take away one's soul and send it into the cycle of reincarnation. In other words, once Lin Yuan became the netherworld god, the first thing he would do was to kill these bastards who played with life and death, and set the cycle of reincarnation back on its normal path. 3 calamities and 9 disasters, 5 decays of heaven and man? Sorry. The heavenly martial world did not care about this. If the netherworld god said you should die, then you must die. The heavenly cycle star formation was definitely not set up to exhaust us to death. Then, the other party must need an absolutely safe space to carry out some kind of preparation. Lin Yuan's gaze became more and more serious as he muttered, "It is not just to guard against me. The Shanqing Heavenly Venerable and Red Cloud Taoist are also targets that the Celestial Emperor needs to guard against. Because both sides have different standpoints, he is standing on that person's side. His purpose in coming to this world is undoubtedly to kill all of us, and remove that person's calamity of death. And that person's calamity of death, currently, is me. Therefore he is now preparing something that can completely kill me. But it still needs time, though." Thinking of this, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he said again, "No, we can't exclude another possibility. The other party has already set up a trap for me, and deliberately set up the heavenly cycle star formation to lure me there. Moreover, this direction is the west of the northern frontier, which means we have to pass through the territories of the Xinjiang Empire, the Chuyan Empire, and the Demon Mountains of the southern wilderness. According to my character, I will not leave my escape route in the hands of others. Therefore, I must destroy these 3 forces. This has changed my strategic plan. I want to destroy the northern frontier with me. In the heavenly martial continent, among the 7 empires, the one that ranked second was called Shiqi. At this moment in the imperial palace of Shiqi, a young man in a white robe embroidered with dragons and purple brocade was sitting on the dragon throne. He looked down at the empty throne room, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, outlining an evil smile on his handsome white face. He seemed to have seen Lin Yuan, who was hesitating countless miles away. The smile on the young man's face grew wider and wider. After a while, a gentle voice sounded in the hall. Then, the right to choose is in your hands again. Do you want to come to Shiqi and fight, or pretend that nothing has happened and bet that I am just bluffing you? Behind the dragon throne, a figure in a black robe stood. It was Baigan, who had been humiliated by Hanba. Baigan bowed slightly and said with a smile, His Royal Highness King of Wu has a great foresight. As soon as he placed his piece, he was already in an invincible position. No matter whether the black dragon comes to Shiqi or not, the final result will not change. It's just a matter of dying sooner or later. King Wu snorted as if he was not interested in Baigan's compliment. He just glanced at Baigan with a cold face and said in a cold voice, Don't make a mistake this time. If my elder brother and your inferior plan appears again, I will personally take action and erase your name from the deification list. Even your last trace of true spirit will be obliterated. As soon as he finished speaking, Baigan's movements became slightly stiff, and his face became a little unnatural, because he knew that what King Wu said was not empty talk. If King Wu was angry, he really had the ability to erase his name from the deification list. If it was in the early days of the Heavenly Court, King Wu would not have such ability because at that time, the Heavenly Court was in need of people. In addition, the disciples of the 3 religions all regarded the deification list as a tribulation, and no one was willing to join the Heavenly Court. Therefore, there was the deification tribulation of the 3 religions, and the dead became the deification list. Chapter 1178. But in the current primordial world, it was really a long story. Ever since the establishment of the Heavenly Court, the 6 saints of heaven no longer had any opponents in the universe. Tao ancestor Hongjun also merged with the Heavenly Tao and completely became the dictator of the primordial world. Therefore, a series of rules came into being. For example, after the 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors ruled the world, the human king could no longer cultivate. Another example was that the Qi refinement cultivators became the only path of cultivation for humans. However, the limit of this path was the level of the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Not to mention the creatures of the primordial world, even the immortals of the heavenly court were like ants. In such an environment, going to the heavenly court to become a god was not a tribulation, but something that countless Qi refinement cultivators had to pursue for their entire lives. Without Wuxia star, there were still thousands of Qi refinement cultivators waiting to fill the position of Wuxia star. Compared to the first emperor King Wu of Zhou, the Wuxia star did not have much prestige. If King Wu spoke, his deity position would be erased in an instant. After all, he was a loser in the struggle for the throne and was sent to the god role to make up the numbers. He was a banner that Hongjun had set up in the human world, a representative of the heavenly Tao suppressing the human world. After GFA, other than Ing Zheng and a few others, which human king did not call himself the emperor. The disciples of the Confucian sect, who were like lackeys of the heavenly Tao, kept flattering those emperors who tried to reverse history and overthrow the advanced policies. They wanted to restore the rights of Zhou, the well-field system and other ancient and backward systems. They scolded the real human kings such as Qin Shi Huang and Han Wu, as tyrants and fatuous rulers. However, to restore the rights of Zhou there had to be a banner, right? In the primordial world, other than the human kings like the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, who dared not to give the first emperor some face. As for his plan with Bo Yikao, in his opinion, it was indeed a failure of a failure. Because at the beginning he conspired with Bo Yikao to seduce Daji with his handsome appearance, hoping to draw this beautiful demon concubine to the camp of Shiqi. However, he failed in the end. Although this history was changed by the Zhou dynasty as the victor, Daji seduced Bo Yikao because of his handsome appearance, but was rejected by Bo Yikao. She killed him in anger. But in fact, the truth was that Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji. But the truth was Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji at all. But the truth was Bo Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji. And Daji did not have had Daji to Daji. But he Yikao, Daji seduced Daji was seduced and Daji say was. Wuxia. God. Wisdom spilled all over the world, but Baigan was like holding an umbrella. GFA turned his head with slight disdain. A trace of viciousness flashed through his eyes. He said in a cold voice, "Don't let me down, Black Jiao." Baigan did not see the trace of viciousness in GFA's eyes. But Baigan was an immortal who had lived for countless years. In just a few words he realized GFA's dissatisfaction with him. Moreover, he also noticed something deeper. GFA was not satisfied with being the emperor. Don't forget, the reason why there were wars among the vassal states in the East Zhou dynasty was that Daji's last attack shattered their reverence for the way of heaven. They no longer respected the high and mighty existence. Instead, they worked hard to become the supreme ruler of the world. These vassal kings included GFA. At that time, when Hongjun was powerful, GFA could restrain his ambition and obediently sit on the throne of the first emperor. But now, even the untainted world was not under Hongjun's control. How could he, who was in the Jianghu world, not show any ambition? Lin Yuan, who was far away in the Wei River, narrowed his eyes slightly. He did not know why, but he felt that someone was spying on him. However, he could not capture the other party's aura. After thinking about it, he felt that the other party was using some kind of magic treasure. That was why this happened. In fact, the reason why the situation in the northern frontier and the Hengduan mountain range was seen by other cultivators was because those cultivators expressed similar wishes. What they saw was broadcast by Lin Yuan using the power of incense. Otherwise, the Heaven Dipper realm and Kongming realm cultivators would not be able to see what happened in the northern frontier. Otherwise, what was the difference between Lin Yuan's hard-earned intelligence organization and taking off his pants to fart? Why would he need to find someone to investigate something that he could see himself? Spying on other existences across countless spacetimes, if one did not use magic treasures, this level of power could only be used by existences who had touched the threshold of gods. If one cultivated to become a god, one did not even need to take the initiative to look. With just a thought, one could receive what one wanted to see. In the world of cultivation, this was called deduction, or being able to calculate with one's fingers. The so-called calculating with one's fingers was just a process of watching. However, after dealing with the trouble in the Hengduan mountain range and the frost mirror grassland in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan took the initiative to cut off the broadcast signal. In addition, with the interference of the system, ordinary existences could not spy on Lin Yuan. At least, the natives of the Jianghu world could not do this. So, he wants to see what choice I have made? Lin Yuan's mind turned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. This kind of scheming behind people's backs had always been his favorite thing to do. He did not expect that someone would dare to use it on him. Shaking his head and clearing his mind, Lin Yuan continued to swim in the direction of the endless sea. Lin Yuan did not care about how those people in the dark were scheming. After all, there was a gap in information between the two sides. At the very least, they definitely did not know that Lin Yuan had cultivated the universal scripture and the way of the ancient totem god. Once the heaven and earth were repaired and the Jianghu world evolved into a medium-class world, Lin Yuan's strength would instantly increase greatly. At least in the Jianghu world, Lin Yuan's battle strength would not be inferior to that of a quasi-sage. Even if the Sky Emperor in the dark had prepared a killing move, it would only be aimed at the current him. When the heaven and earth were repaired, it would be time for the storm to surge. Now that the heaven and earth were about to be repaired, the Sky Emperor could not help but secretly play tricks. First, he sent a small character like the Wu family head to hook up with Li Zhong. Now, he did not hesitate to expose himself to divert Lin Yuan's attention to the west. When the heaven and earth were repaired and the supreme treasure appeared, if the Sky Emperor could still hide in his great heavenly cycle star formation, Lin Yuan could only give him a thumbs up. There were not many people who could endure to this extent, but there were definitely some. Moreover, this kind of person would not be sent to the Jianghu world by Hongjun. The Sky Emperor was here to remove Hongjun's death tribulation, not to compete with Lin Yuan in terms of patience. Chapter 1179. In the Eldritch World. Two elders in spotless white robes sat in front of a chessboard. They stared at the chessboard in front of them seriously. The strange thing was that there was not a single chess piece on the chessboard. However, if one sank his consciousness into it, he would be able to see the mountains and rivers of the Eldritch World. With the world as the chessboard and the common people as the chess pieces. Since Pangu opened the sky, one of them had been sitting on one side of the chessboard. He had been playing the role of the chess player. He played the entire Eldritch World in the palm of his hand. His name was Hongjun. Many people thought that Hongjun suppressed both the Tao of man and the Tao of earth by himself and became the supreme ruler of the Eldritch world. However, Hongjun's ambition was far more than that. In the mortal world, there was a book written by Wang Bao during the Western Han Dynasty, for scholars on virtue. It was recorded that in the world of Hongjun, what was not happy? The Hongjun here referred to the world of peace and the world of Tao. With just this sentence, Hongjun's ambition was obvious. He did not simply want to combine with the Tao of heaven, suppress both the Tao of man and the Tao of earth and become the dictator of the Eldritch world. He wanted to replace the position of the Tao of heaven and become the ruler of the Eldritch world. When that time comes, Hongjun's every word and action would become an irreversible rule of the Eldritch world. It was not like now. It was just that the other Eldritch world creatures were afraid of Hongjun's power and had no choice but to obey the rules set by Hongjun. The Tao of heaven would naturally not ignore the ambitious Hongjun. Therefore, the Grand Supreme successfully became a sage. However, the good corpse incarnation walked around the mortal world. When he left Hanggu Pass, he attracted the purple clouds from the east. He wrote the Tao Te Ching, and obtained immeasurable merit. The Grand Supreme even destroyed his position as a sage of the heavenly path and became an even more powerful sage of the Great Path. He even snatched away Hongjun's title of Tao Ancestor. The current Hongjun was not worthy of being called Tao Ancestor. At most, he could only call himself the leader of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. However, the Taoist Sect of Wonders was a branch of the Tao. All of this happened right under Hongjun's nose. However, Grand Supreme only realized it after everything was done. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to see that Grand Supreme was actually a cannon that had been pushed out by the Great Tao. It was specially used to compete with him. If he couldn't defeat the Grand Supreme, he would naturally die. But if he won, he would have the chance to replace the Great Tao, just like when the time was right he would be one with the Heavenly Tao. Therefore, on the other side of the chessboard, there was a position for the Grand Supreme. Haha, I'm afraid teacher has already lost half of this game. The Grand Elder smiled and stroked his beard, which was whiter than his white robe. He was obviously teasing, but there was no sarcasm in his tone. Instead, he seemed to be seriously reminding Hongjun. Hongjun was not annoyed. He smiled and said, "How can a sparrow know the ambition of a swan? But even if it becomes a swan, the overlords of the heavens are still eagles and condors." Hongjun was indeed a little annoyed that GFA did not listen to his orders and tried to become the king of man. However, compared to the big picture, GFA's small actions were like a naughty child throwing a tantrum with his parents. It was not worth mentioning. The three sovereigns were trapped in the fire cloud cave and could not take a single step out. None of the 5 emperors had a good ending. As for the king of man, Yingzheng and Lu Che, there was no need to talk about them. They were too far away from existences like them. They did not even need to do anything. The Confucian sect in the mortal world could easily make them notorious tyrants. After the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the only king of man that gave Hongjun a headache was actually DXIN. Not to mention a small character like GFA who had to endure and scheme to become the king of man. Even if it was DXIN, didn't he still die in the end? Thinking of DXN, the smile on Hongjun's face gradually faded. After the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the human path had been completely suppressed by Hongjun. This kind of suppression was so serious that the king of man could not cultivate. He did not want another king of man to revive the human path. However, DXN, as a mortal, refused the high and mighty prehistoric creatures and even launched a counterattack against the Shen sect at that time. The final winner of the investiture of the gods was the Zhou dynasty, the Chan sect, and the Ren sect. The foundation of the Shang dynasty was burned to the ground. The king of man, DXN, did not even have a complete corpse left. However, no one would forget how terrifying that war was. The 3 sects of the Shen sect appeared at the same time. The Western sect was also involved in the catastrophe. Even the mother of man, Nuwa, did not escape. Other than Hongjun, the 6 saints were directly wiped out. Moreover, the Chan sect, the Ren sect, and the Western sect worked together but did not gain the upper hand in the war. Instead, they were repeatedly injured by the Shang dynasty. In the end, even the saints were forced to personally fight. Under the situation where Nuwa did not dare to make a move, the 4 saints worked together to extinguish the arrogance of the Tongtian sect. Without the help of the disciples of the Jie sect, the Shang dynasty was faced with a large group of traders and various qi refinement cultivators. Even so, DXN ruthlessly tricked the heavenly Tao before his death. A mortal dynasty, in the end, forced the saints to personally fight for it. It was simple to say, but if one thought about it carefully, one would know how powerful the Shang dynasty was at that time. However, in the Jianghu world, even if GFA had his own little plan, Hongjun was not without people he could use. For example, Bai Gan and Yin Hong. They were famous existences on the investiture of the gods. No matter where they were, they would be firmly controlled by Hongjun. As long as Hongjun had a thought, they would be like dogs that saw a bone and run over to him. Hongjun suddenly raised his head and stared at the Grand Supreme's face meaningfully. He suddenly remembered that he had sent Mosquito Daoran with the purpose of detonating the karma between Mosquito Daoran and the Tongtian sect, causing a calamity in that small kiliacosm. Perhaps Mosquito Daoran, who was involved in the situation, did not understand, but the Grand Supreme would not be unaware of his plan. Even so, the Grand Supreme still sent Mosquito Daoran with a tough attitude. It was obvious that the Grand Supreme was not on the same side as him. He would not let a disciple who had made great contributions to him to carry out a mission that would definitely lead to death. The scheme behind this was probably very deep. This round is not over yet, teacher. The Grand Supreme still had a smile on his face. However, as if he had thought of something, he directly interrupted Hongjun's thoughts. Yes, this round is not over yet. Hongjun was slightly stunned. A smile appeared on his face again as he softly agreed. The final game had not yet begun. The victory and defeat today was just a simple victory and defeat. It was not a big deal. Chapter 1180. 3 days later. Lin Yuan had already entered the Outer Sea area. Compared to the Endless Sea, the current Outer Sea area could be said to be extremely withered. Nearly 80% of the Sea Demon clan's encampments could be said to be empty at this moment. There were even some Sea Demon clan's encampments that clearly had the characteristics of aquatic Sea Demon beasts living in them. They were obviously outsiders who had taken over the nest. This scene couldn't help but make Lin Yuan frown slightly. The war that he had started but didn't participate in, what was the result of it now? The Sea Demon beasts couldn't have been wiped out, right? This wasn't good news. After all, Lin Yuan was now standing in the Endless Sea and had already offended the dragon bloodline demon beasts. The city of trade was a piece of fat meat in their eyes, and they couldn't wait to pounce and take a bite. The reason why the Sea Demon Guild and the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas didn't take action was that Lin Yuan had lured the Sea Demon beasts into the situation, causing them to have no time to take care of themselves. However, if any of them were wiped out, the position of the Overlord of the Endless Sea would be confirmed in a short time, and the gray-scaled flood dragon people under Lin Yuan's command wouldn't have a place to stand. However, the current situation clearly indicated that the situation of the demon beasts in the outer seas had reached a critical point. Whether it was sea demon beasts or wild beasts, the nest was extremely important. If they stepped into the hunting range, as long as they ran fast enough, they could still survive. However, if they stepped into the nest, even if they ran to the end of the world, they would be chased by the nest owner. 4 sea demon beasts and wild beasts that struggled on the line of life and death every day, the nest was the only safe place. If the nest wasn't safe, then the uneasiness and fear brought by the sense of crisis was enough to make them fall into madness. Now, the nests of the sea demon beasts were either abandoned or occupied by outsiders. It seemed that the sea demon beasts hadn't returned here for a long time. However, even if that was the case, there should be some young adults, females and cubs in their nests, right? Or could it be that the outer sea demon beasts had already destroyed the dragon clan of the Four Seas, so they had moved to the inner sea? With an uneasy feeling, Lin Yuan continued to swim forward. However, Lin Yuan was not optimistic about the future of the demon beasts that had taken the opportunity to enter the endless sea. After all, the sea was completely different from the land, rivers and lakes. Even if these demon beasts could ignore the difference in water quality, they might not be able to survive in the endless sea. The sea beasts in the endless sea might not have the same intelligence as the demon beasts, nor could they cultivate by themselves. However, their size, strength, and speed were not something that the wild beasts could compare with. Lin Yuan had once seen a giant octopus that was more than 10,000 feet long. If it was placed in his previous world, it would be enough to be called a monster. Even if many demon beasts revealed their true form, they might not be able to be compared with it. However, that octopus was just an ordinary sea beast, and was still 108,000 miles away from becoming a demon beast. Lin Yuan had no doubt that once that octopus cultivated into a demon beast, it would have the battle prowess comparable to a demon king. This giant octopus was not an exception in the endless sea. It should be said that most of the sea beasts had a similar level of terror. Especially when one was close to the deep sea region, the sea beasts there were even more terrifying. Even a demon king could fall in the hands of the sea beasts. Compared to the endless sea, the Sky Martial continent was simply a paradise. Another half a month passed. Lin Yuan came from the outer sea region of the Endless Sea to the Willowstone Great Wall that bordered the Deep Sea region. At this time, Lin Yuan finally saw the demon beasts that truly belonged to the Endless Sea. Most of the outer sea demon beasts were gathered here, occupying the original Willowstone Great Wall. Occasionally one could see their young swimming around, as if the Willowstone Great Wall was their nest. It seems that the war has ended. Neither side gained any benefits and their anger is getting worse. Lin Yuan looked at the Willowstone Great Wall that was crawling with demon beasts with a strange expression and whispered softly. These outer sea demon beasts seem to have gained an advantage. Although they gave up their original territory, they occupied the Willowstone Great Wall. Lin Yuan could also see some demon beasts busily rebuilding the Willowstone Great Wall. It seemed that they intended to turn the dragon bloodline demon beasts that had spent a lot of money to build the Willowstone Great Wall into something that belonged to them. This was not surprising. After all, if it were not for Lin Yuan's intervention, most of these outer sea demon beasts would have died before they could take down the Willowstone Great Wall. Then they would have to face the dragon bloodline demon beasts that were at their peak. In the countless years of hatred between the outer sea demon beasts and the dragon bloodline demon beasts, it was precisely because of the existence of the Willowstone Great Wall that the outer sea demon beasts did not even have the ability to take the initiative to attack. Now that they had taken over the Willowstone Great Wall, if they did not do something, it would be truly confusing. The Eye of God opened. 160 miles away was the dragon bloodline demon beast's camp. However, one belonged to the Sea Demon Guild, and the other belonged to the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. The two camps were clearly separated. Obviously, something had happened that caused the two groups of people who had originally joined forces to completely fall apart. Now, their purpose here was not to drive the outer sea demon beasts back to their territory, but to prevent the outer sea demon beasts from taking a step further. In fact, these two groups of people were also on guard against each other. That's true. Lin Yuan shook his head with a chuckle. Although he did not know the background of the outer sea demon beasts, he was still clear about the background of the dragon bloodline demon beast. Even if they had been slaughtered by the existence that was also the host, they should be far stronger than the outer sea demon beast. If they had such a big advantage, it seemed that there was no other reason other than internal strife to explain why they could not defeat the outer sea demon beasts. However, why would the dragon bloodline demon beasts fight among themselves? Whether it was the dragon gods of the dragon clan of the Four Seas or the great demons of the other clans, none of them would be stupid enough to engage in internal strife in the face of a great enemy. After all, the nature of the outer sea demon beasts attacking the deep sea region was completely different from the nature of Lin Yuan, a businessman, who took the opportunity to establish himself in the endless sea. With a few flashes of his body, Lin Yuan had already arrived at the foot of the Great Wall of Willows. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak, countless bloodthirsty gazes stared at Lin Yuan. After all, when the pure bloodline of the flood dragon's body was revealed, these demonic beasts from the outer sea, who were extremely hostile to dragon blood demonic beasts, did not directly attack him. It could be said that they were very polite. "Welcome, Dragon King. Sorry for not coming out to greet you." A loud voice sounded from the Great Wall of Lushur. Lin Yuan raised his head and saw a human stepping on the wall, staring at Lin Yuan condescendingly. His black and white eyes were shining with an inexplicable luster. Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "This king doesn't like to talk with his head raised, and he doesn't like to be looked down at. Are you sure you want to talk to this king in this manner?" Chapter 1181. The mutant standing on the Great Wall of Willows was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly said, "The Dragon King entered the Endless Sea without saying a word. I'm afraid he has other plans. If that's the case, I hope the Dragon King can tell me the purpose of this trip. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't make things easy for the Dragon King." The mutant had personally experienced the horror of the Black Jiao. With a force far weaker than that of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, he had repeatedly defeated the sea area set up by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. In the end, he had completely separated the Great Wall of Willows from the sea area controlled by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. The Great Wall of Willows, which the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had relied on, had become a coffin to bury them. Now that the Black Jiao had entered the Endless Sea again, once he stood on the side of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, it would be a fatal blow to them. "Is it up to you to make things easy or not?" Lin Yuan's narrowed eyes slowly opened. His aura began to rise. He said coldly, "It seems that you don't understand what this king means. Well, since you want to be high and mighty, this king will personally drag you down. How dare you? How dare you? You're courting death. Before the mutant could reply, countless outer sea demonic beasts roared. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced on Lin Yuan. However, ordinary sea demonic beasts were as weak as a joke to Lin Yuan. Before they could even get within 100 meters of Lin Yuan, they had already turned into ice sculptures. Some of them didn't even have a complete corpse left. They were directly crushed into minced meat by the sudden increase in pressure of the water current. However, these were just ordinary outer sea demonic beasts. Neither the mutant nor his subordinates such as Mo-Ta had any intention of joining the fight. The Black Jiao's invincible aura was there for all to see. Apart from a few small fries who didn't know the difference between life and death, these people who were at the same level as the Black Jiao or even higher, only had a deep sense of reverence for the Black Jiao. They didn't dare to fight with the Black Jiao at all, because the slightest carelessness could cause their hundreds or even thousands of years of cultivation to be destroyed in a single day. As expected of the Dragon King of the northern frontier who defeated the southern wasteland, slaughtered the Yun nation, and extinguished the Frost Mirror. Pa, pa, pa. The strange man said flattering words and at the same time, he gently clapped his hands. However, his eyes were extremely cold as he coldly said, "However, you dare to touch this monarch's subordinates. Do you think this monarch is made of mud?" No one doubted that the mutant's methods and heart were ruthless enough. In a sense, the mutant had done something similar to Lin Yuan. Moreover, compared to Lin Yuan, who had conquered the northern frontier as a demonic beast and ruled over the human race, the mutant had mixed with the outer sea demonic beasts until now and become the leader of a sea demon force. The difficulty of this was only higher. Because Lin Yuan's predecessor was originally a human, he was very clear about the weaknesses of human beings and also knew how to communicate with them. Coupled with the experience brought by the information explosion era and the help of the system, it was only natural that Lin Yuan could do what he did now. Otherwise he would be called incompetent. However, although demonic beasts were also intelligent life forms, they were ultimately different from humans. A human cub mixed with a group of demonic beasts slowly grew, became stronger, and then reached his current position. In the series of events that he experienced, if there was a slight mistake, he would immediately become food in the stomach of a demonic beast. However, so what? No matter how lucky a player was, if he encountered a cheat, he would only be a delivery man. Lin Yuan's real cultivation level was lower than the mutant's by a large realm, but after all, he was still a cheat who could use the power of incense. As for whether the mutant could use the power of incense or not, it didn't matter. After all, accumulating the power of incense was a painstaking effort. Even if the mutant used up all his wealth, he might not be able to compete with Lin Yuan. What's more, including the mutant, there was no native in the Jianghu continent who dared to squander the power of incense like Lin Yuan. In their eyes, incense was something that could prolong their lives. Whether you are a pushover or not, what does it have to do with this king? This king will give you one last chance. Either you let go of the road or... Lin Yuan tilted his head slightly and turned his gaze in another direction. He grinned viciously and said, "God worship sect Ing Zai?" The water dragon form with wings on its back paused slightly, as if it didn't expect Lin Yuan to recognize it. After a moment, the water dragon form shook and transformed into a young man in a black robe. However, the young man's face was still covered with scales, and his body faintly emitted the smell of a snake. It was a typical appearance of a demonic beast who was in the process of transforming but had not yet completed. If it was in the Eldritch world, most of these demonic beasts who had transformed would hide in their own caves to cultivate. This was because transforming was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for demonic beasts. If they encountered some kind of strong stimulation, the transformation process would be interrupted, and they would be frozen forever. This Ing Zai was obviously in the transformation stage, but he still came out to stir up trouble. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes, and he took a few steps towards Ing Zai. As expected, seeing the fierce light in Lin Yuan's eyes, Ing Zai couldn't help but show a touch of fear in his eyes. He subconsciously stepped back and raised a hand to signal Lin Yuan to stop. He said with a wry smile, "Dragon King, why are you so angry? I just came to see what kind of conflict there is between the Dragon King and the dissimulated man, and whether it can be mediated." Speaking of this, he turned to look at the dissimulated man and said, "Dissimulated man, this is your fault. No matter what, the Dragon King is one of us. If you have any dissatisfaction, just say it. Why do you have to block the way of the Dragon King?" The dissimulated man snorted and stared at Lin Yuan with gloomy eyes. He said in a cold voice, I didn't stop him. He didn't want to say why he wanted to go to the deep sea area. Can I assume that he went there to help the dragon clan of the Four Seas deal with us? After all, he came here to use us to divert the attention of the dragon clan of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild. Now that we have the upper hand, he went there to help the dragon bloodline demon beast deal with us. By stirring up this pool of water, he can naturally benefit from it. Hearing this, Ying Zai showed Lin Yuan an apologetic smile, and then immediately looked at the dissimulated man and said, "If you have something to say, come down first. We are all on the same side. Let's talk it out." Ying Zai and the dissimulated man's act of playing the good cop and bad cop, but he didn't say anything. These two were just trying to force him to come down here. If they couldn't come to an agreement, the demon beasts from the outer sea and the ancestor monster of the god worship sect would probably join forces to kill him. "Oh, I'm not going down." The dissimulated man sneered and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He looked at Lin Yuan coldly and said, "This Black Jiao's bloodline is still that of a dragon bloodline demon beast. He helped us because he wanted to save himself. Now that he has entered the endless sea again, who knows which side he is on." Chapter 1182. Suddenly Ying Zai's face darkened. Because Ying Zai also had the bloodline of the dragon clan, but its origin was different from that of the dragon clan of the Four Seas. The dissimulated man also scolded it. Moreover, it had already said so much. Even if one played the good cop and the other played the bad cop, it shouldn't be like this, right? What was the difference between the dissimulated man's behavior and directly flipping the table? Lin Yuan curled up his body and said with a sneer, "Can't you see? You've been fooled. Not only me, but I guess the god worship sect has also been regarded as an enemy by him. Now, the one standing behind him is either the guardian of the celestial gate or—" Speaking of this, Lin Yuan's voice stopped abruptly, and a look of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. The celestial emperor's speed was much faster than he had imagined. He didn't even let go of the endless sea. However, to play such a big game at once, wasn't he afraid that he would be stuffed to death? Hearing this, Ying Zai's face became a little unnatural. It didn't want Black Jiao to enter the endless sea again, because at this stage of the war, the situation was very clear. As long as the dragon clan of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild didn't work together, they would be defeated one by the monsters in the outer sea sooner or later. At that time, the god worship sect could take advantage of the situation and enter. Not only could they harvest the faith of the monsters in the endless sea, but they could also compete for the position of the overlord of the endless sea. But now, it was estimated that Black Jiao wasn't the only one who wanted to enter the game. There was another group of people who had contacted the dissimulated man before Black Jiao and won the trust of the dissimulated man. Otherwise, the dissimulated man wouldn't have such an attitude at this moment. He didn't even give face to Ying Zai. "Black Jiao, we have been waiting for you for a long time under the order of King Wu." A somewhat familiar voice sounded. Soon after, Yin Hong, who was wearing purple gold armor, appeared on the city wall. However, with just a glance, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Last time, Yin Hong had been defeated by him. Although he had killed Yu Jiang, the fist intent left behind by Di Shang in Yin Hong's hand had been completely blocked by Lin Yuan. In a short period of time, Yin Hong probably did not have the courage to find trouble with him. Moreover, Lin Yuan had directly entered the endless sea from the Wei River. It could be said that it was the fastest path. Otherwise, anyone would have to avoid the disaster areas of the Sky Demon. No matter how powerful one's divine ability was, they would not be able to withstand the endless attacks of the Sky Demon. Even if Yin Hong had left first, it would be impossible for him to reach the endless sea before him. This guy was most likely not Yin Hong. If he looked similar to Yin Hong, then he must be Yin Jiao. It was just that he did not know how capable this guardian Tai Sui was. After all, the magic treasures on Yin Hong's body were all imitations. The real magic treasures had been taken away by Qi Jingzi. Moreover, Yin Hong's most powerful magic treasure, the Yin Yang Mirror, did not even have an imitation. When faced with Lin Yuan's methods, he could only flee pathetically. But what about Yin Jiao? One had to know that Yin Jiao's master, Guang Qingzi, was not simple. In most myths and legends, Guang Qingzi was the kind of person who had maxed out his martial strength. Even the sword Immortal Path, which was number 1 in terms of killing and speed, originated from Guang Qingzi. In some records, as one of the 5 emperors, the Yellow Emperor Shen Yuan had asked Guang Qingzi. However, Lin Yuan did not believe this story. After all, the Yellow Emperor was one of the ancient human kings. No matter what he faced, he would not easily bend because these human kings had to fight for a future path for the human race in that dark era. However, in those records, it was written that the Yellow Emperor had asked Guang Qingzi. He had knelt on the ground and walked with his knees. He had respectfully come before Guang Qingzi and kowtowed twice. Even the heavens and earth could not make a human king bow, let alone an immortal. However, an immortal who dared to lie about the Yellow Emperor Shen Yuan and could still live well was very difficult to deal with. As for the heaven-flipping seal Luo Hun Bell, and the male and female swords that Guang Qingzi had given to Yin Jiao, which one of them was not a famous treasure? Even if Yin Jiao only had imitations, he would probably be a very difficult existence to deal with. However, this group of people from the heavenly court was indeed dedicated. First, Yin Hong and Yu Jiang went to the northern frontier to find trouble with him. When the matter at the northern frontier came to an end, he actually bumped into Yin Jiao when he came to the Endless Sea. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "It's really interesting. The eldest son of DXN, the crown prince of Yin Shang, can actually settle down and be GFA's lackey. I think the biggest failure of DXIN in his life is to have two sons, Yu and Yin Hong." As soon as he finished speaking, the aura on Yin Jiao's body suddenly shook. In the next moment, Yin Jiao narrowed his eyes and his body shook, revealing the body with 3 heads, 3 eyes and 6 arms that he had learned from Guang Qingzi. Although he was not an Azura, the terrifying murderous aura on his body was not inferior to that of an Azura. Obviously, Yin Jiao was more than qualified to be the god position of Guardian Tai Sui. Moreover, what was interesting was that if one only looked at the history of the investiture of the gods, the famous Neza and Yang Jian actually had similarities with Yin Jiao. It was not a problem to say that Yin Jiao was the prototype of Neza and Yang Jian. In the records of these two in the literature, it could be said that they had copied Yin Jiao's homework and then added other settings to create a brand new character. After Yin Jiao revealed his body with 3 heads, 3 eyes and 6 arms, he did not stop at all. He directly turned into an afterimage and crashed into Lin Yuan. A pair of male and female swords slid out from his waist like 2 long rainbows. The terrifying sword aura was so terrifying that people could not even look directly at it, as expected of the disciple of the ancestor of sword immortals. Lin Yuan sincerely praised, but there was no trace of panic in his eyes. As a member of the heavenly court, Yin Jiao originally stood on the opposite side of Lin Yuan. In addition to Lin Yuan's provocation, he attacked in anger. His sword aura was vast and majestic. Even when faced with such a sword aura, Lin Yuan felt like he was a small boat floating in the vast ocean, as though he could be overturned by a storm at any time. Tut. Lin Yuan opened his mouth and spat out a syllable. Immediately, the surrounding seawater surged wildly and gathered together. In the blink of an eye, it turned into threads of mysterious ice, forming a large net that enveloped Yin Jiao's sword aura. The sword aura and ice net collided and biting cold air spread out. Even though the surrounding living desolate demons and Demon King realm great demons were basically all alive, they could not help but shiver in the face of the cold air. They hurriedly circulated their demonic chi to resist it. Otherwise, if they were enveloped in such cold air, even if these demonic beasts had strong bodies, there might be some irreversible side effects left behind. Sizzle, the sword aura and ice net did not give way to each other. At the intersection, there were constantly ear-piercing sounds, as though ice had fallen into a raging fire. 3 breaths later, the ice net that Lin Yuan casually condensed suddenly collapsed under the attack of the sword aura. The ice net was split into 2 from the middle, as though it had been cut by a sharp weapon. After the sword aura passed through, the remaining ice net slowly shattered, turning into ice shards that covered the ground. Chapter 1183. However, even though he won the ice net, the remaining sword chi was already at the end of its tether. It gently brushed past Lin Yuan's face, leaving a shallow white mark on a black scale, and then directly dissipated into nothingness. Yin Jiao immediately stopped his actions and stood still on the great wall of willow stone, but his gaze towards Lin Yuan was clearly filled with fear. As an immortal who had lived for countless years, Yin Jiao was not a small character who had not seen the world. On the contrary, as the god of the heavenly court, Yin Jiao's strength was not inferior to Neza and Yang Jian in the slightest. Therefore, even though this exchange of blows was not over, it allowed him to see how terrifying Lin Yuan was. In order to greet Lin Yuan, Yin Jiao had spent a lot of effort on the sword chi just now. The process of washing, nurturing and unsheathing took nearly 3 months. However, Lin Yuan's ice net was casually formed. Although the exchange of blows between the two sides only lasted for 3 breaths of time, and it seemed that Lin Yuan had suffered a small loss. In fact, both sides knew that Yin Jiao was the loser. Angry out of humiliation? Lin Yuan asked with a fake smile. Without waiting for Yin Jiao to answer, Lin Yuan had already opened his bloody mouth. In an instant, endless biting cold whistled out, and a wisp of white light flew up the great wall of willow stone at a speed almost imperceptible to the naked eye, and fiercely crashed into Yin Jiao's chest. Yin Jiao's body trembled slightly, and the surrounding demonic beasts all looked over. They saw an oval-shaped frost mark on Yin Jiao's chest, and it was constantly spreading in all directions. At this rate, Yin Jiao would be frozen into an ice sculpture on the spot in a few breaths of time. At this moment, the strange man's face suddenly revealed a trace of panic, because he realized that Black Jiao's strength was far beyond his imagination. Yin Jiao, who was originally waiting to ambush the Black Jiao, had actually suffered 2 huge losses at the hands of the Black Jiao. From the looks of it, Yin Jiao was not a match for the Black Jiao. As Yin Jiao's partner, how could he still have a good time after Yin Jiao's defeat? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not follow up with another attack. His current influence was not enough to affect the great desolate world. For example, Yin Hong, Yin Jiao, Baigan, and the other famous immortals on the investiture of the gods list could not be killed. Even if he killed them in the Jianghu world, it would not take long for them to reappear in the investiture of the gods list. There were only 2 ways to kill these immortals on the investiture of the gods list. The first way was to cut off their source of incense. After a short period of time, the power of incense would be exhausted, and they would fall into a deep sleep, which was no different from death. If they slept for too long, existences below the golden immortal realm would be destroyed by the 3 calamities and 9 disasters, and the 5 decays of heaven and man. The other way was to control the investiture of the gods list. These immortals with true spirits on the investiture of the gods list had already died long ago. Rather than saying that they were life forms with independent consciousness, it would be better to say that they were just tool spirits condensed by the investiture of the gods list. As long as their names were erased from the investiture of the gods list, their souls would naturally disperse. This was also why being deified by the investiture of the gods list was tantamount to becoming a slave, because their life and death were in the hands of the controller of the investiture of the gods list. Unless they became a saint, they would never be free. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not have the idea of killing Yin Jiao here. It was meaningless to waste his energy. If not for this, Yin Hong would not have been able to leave the northern frontier alive even if he had been pushed out of Yujiang. With a smile in his eyes, Lin Yuan stepped back slightly and said to Ying Zai, "The next problem is between the sect of gods, the mutant, and this person. I only want to pass through the Great Wall of Willow Sure. Do you have any objections?" Hearing this, Ying Zai was silent for a moment, and a hint of fear flashed across his eyes. However, soon he sneered and looked at Yin Jiao's face, which was already covered with a layer of frost. He said in a cold voice, "Dragon King, if you have other things to do, please go first. If we have a chance to meet again in the future, I will definitely treat you well. As for this friend from the heavenly court, let me deal with him." The mutant glanced at Ying Zai and Lin Yuan with a gloomy face. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand and said, "Switch." Although he had long known that the background of the sect of gods was not simple, after all, their ancestors had some ties with the dragon tribe of the 4 seas. Tracing back to the source, it was even more than the hatred between the demon beasts of the outer sea and the dragon tribe of the 4 seas. However, he had never thought that the background of the sect of gods would be related to the mysterious power behind Black Jiao. Whether it was Lin Yuan, Ying Zai, or Yin Jiao, they were all well aware of the mutant's thoughts. However, compared to the natives of the Jianghu world, whether it was Lin Yuan who had the system or the creatures of the untainted world, their strength, vision, and background were far superior to the mutant. In the world where the Great Era did not appear, the mutant could naturally be called the top people. However, when the Great Era came, the almighty hidden figures would appear. The natives of the Jianghu world, who thought they stood at the top, were just chess pieces that could be discarded at any time. The mutant wanted to take all the advantages. First, he used Lin Yuan to take down the Great Wall of Willow Stone. Then, he borrowed the strength of the sect of gods to compete with the dragon tribe of the 4 seas. Now that the situation was almost in the bag, he joined forces with Yin Jiao from the heavenly court to try to kick the sect of gods out. His basic purpose was nothing more than to provoke the conflict between the sect of gods and the heavenly court, so that he could reap the benefits of the endless sea. However, would things really be as easy as he had expected? Not to mention that Lin Yuan had returned to the endless sea at this time to break the game. Even if Ying Zai and Yin Jiao collided head-on, The one who would be kicked out would only be the mutant, who did not know anything and thought that everything was within his calculations. It was hard to say what the original form of Ing Zai was. It could be a demon body that turned into a dragon, or it could be like Lin Yuan, who came to this world as a soul to possess a demon beast. However, in the untainted world, the surname Ing was not a small family. For example, after the Zhou dynasty, the first emperor of Qin dynasty, Ing Zheng, who once again unified the world, was also called the dragon soul of Wuxia, the ancestral dragon. This Ing Zai most likely had something to do with Ing Zheng's branch. Otherwise, Ing Zai would not have taken over the hot potato Ing Jiao. After all, in terms of origin, the ancestor of the Ing family was the general under Dxan Li. If it were not for the betrayal of Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, the Shang dynasty would not have been destroyed. For a long time, Li was even slandered as a villain who only knew how to talk, flatter, and frame others. The descendant of the Ing family met Yin Jiao. This was interesting. Chapter 1184. Lin Yuan did not pay much attention to the matters between Ing Zai, Yin Jiao and the dissimilated man. However, he managed to obtain some interesting information from Yin Jiao. The Heaven Emperor of Tianwu world was actually King Wu of Zhou, GFA. The 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors established a great era. It was also these heroes that made countless powerful primitive creatures see the potential of human beings. It was also from then on that the human king who ruled the world could not cultivate. Even if he was rich, he could only live as an ordinary person for the rest of his life. This was a rule that Hong Jun had personally set. For example, even if the emperor of the empire in the Tianwu world cultivated, he could only stop at the Tiangang realm. This was also a rule set by the guardians of the heavenly gates. This was to prevent them from becoming too powerful and eventually surpassing their control. As the representative of the emperor, GFA also did not cultivate. After all, he had to set an example. If even the first emperor recommended by Hong Jun secretly cultivated, what about those ambitious people who did not want to be the emperor but the human king? When his subordinates who had the background of Chan sect and Ren sect fought with Yin Shang sect's generals, GFA never stepped forward. Sometimes, even a little bit of the aftermath of the battle was enough to kill King Wu. He was not King Xian of Shang. Without the protection of the emperor's aura that even saints could not use, even a stray arrow on the battlefield could kill him, let alone a battle between immortals. According to the normal course of history, GFA should have been dead by now. However, this son of heaven who had followed the will of the heavens had appeared in the martial heaven world and taken up the position of celestial emperor. Clearly, this martial king wasn't very honest. Even though GFA was an important character in the investiture god Calamity, he had to at least ensure that he was still a human in order to sit on the throne. So in the end, Jianghu was sent to the investiture god list while GFA wasn't. However, according to GFA's character, Jianghu's entry into the investiture of the gods was most likely not voluntary. Instead, after Yinshang was destroyed, GFA forced him into the investiture of the gods and directly sent him to the investiture of the gods. Lin Yuan did not have much interest in GFA. As the saying goes, as long as one stood in the wind, even a pig could fly into the sky. GFA was just a lucky guy chosen by Hong Jun. From the beginning to the end, he and his Shichi did nothing. Almost all the disciples of the Ren sect and the Chan sect fought for him and defeated the soldiers of the Shang dynasty. The only positive effect he played was that no one was willing to be the leader when they made a mistake. After a leader appeared, the rest of the people would ignite the malice in their hearts. If GFA did not take the lead to rebel, they might not have the courage to challenge DXN. What was even more ridiculous was that GFA and Ji Chang were not willing to lead the rebellion. However, in Baigan and Boikao's plan, they did not manage to seduce Daji. Instead, they attracted DXIN's suspicion. In addition, Jiang Zia was still nearing the end of his life. If they did not attack Yinshang, Jiang Zia would probably die of old age in bed. The situation of a hero was the most suitable for the father and son of the Ji family. Originally, he was interested in this mysterious heaven sovereign. But now, after returning to the city of trade, Lin Yuan did not see Cyrus and Jiao Yi. After asking a gray-scaled flood dragon person, he found out that although the city of trade had started operating, its influence was quite limited. Even if Lin Yuan could set up an extremely convenient teleportation formation, it would be useless. The sea areas far away from the city of trade would not trade with them. To put it bluntly, they did not trust this group of gray-scaled flood dragon people who suddenly appeared. In addition, with Lin Yuan's northern frontier, those dragon blood demon beasts did not even have the time to suppress the city of trade. How could they take the initiative to trade with the City of Trade? Therefore, during this period of time, the business target of the City of Trade had always been the sea monster groups near the sea area. However, it was now the war season, and various sea areas could be said to be in short supply for various materials. Even if the City of Trade was not as popular as Lin Yuan expected at the beginning, it could still be said that it made a lot of money. Jiao Yi and Cyrus went to other sea areas for two reasons. Firstly, they wanted to continue setting up teleportation formations. Secondly, they wanted to discuss cooperation with other sea areas or persuade them to cooperate with the City of Trade. After all, with the supply of resources from the northern frontier, the City of Trade would not lack any resources in the short term. As long as these sea areas cooperated with the City of Trade once, they would definitely become repeat customers. Judging from the financial report, Jiao Yi's persuasion seemed to be fruitful. Recently, many sea monsters who lived far away came to the City of Trade to shop or place orders. It seemed that Jiao Yi had indeed grown up during this period of time. If it was the Jiao Yi of the past, he would most likely stay in the City of Trade obediently and wait for Lin Yuan's next instructions when faced with such a predicament. But now Jiao Yi had learned the method of, if the mountain doesn't come to me, I'll go to the mountain. Although he still brought Cyrus with him, it was better to be prepared than to be unchanging and arrogant. With a gratified smile, Lin Yuan returned to his own villa. He planned to rest for a while and check out the situation in the Endless Sea. But before Lin Yuan could sit down, the crab boss barged into Lin Yuan's villa and said with a dignified expression, "Dragon King, you are finally back. The president told me that once you return to the Endless Sea, no matter what means I use, I will kidnap you if I can't invite you. Anyway, I have to trouble you to meet him." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and didn't know how to respond. Although he still didn't know the specific situation, now that the president of the Siren Guild had personally come and asked him to meet him, it could only mean that the relationship between the Siren Guild and the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas was extremely bad. Even when they were facing such a big enemy like the demon beasts from the Outer Sea, both sides had no intention of making peace. Otherwise, Lin Yuan would be one of the existences that they would work together to push out. It would be impossible for him to meet the higher-ups of both sides at this time. Moreover, Lin Yuan had previously helped the Siren Guild to take down the Great Wall of Willowshire. For a dragon bloodline demon beast, it was simply a black mark that could not be removed. However, the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas seemed to be a little arrogant. Lin Yuan didn't believe that they didn't know about the actions of the Siren Guild. Since they didn't stop it, it meant that they had already expressed their stance. However, they didn't send anyone to contact Lin Yuan, nor did they take the initiative to make peace with the Siren Guild. It was as if they were waiting for Lin Yuan to take the initiative to talk to them. Chapter 1185. No matter how one looked at it, it was not a right decision to get involved in this chaotic world. Especially between the Outer Sea demonic beasts and the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, their brains were about to spill. Moreover, since Lucia Great Wall was out of the control of the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, there was no possibility of peace in this war. Either the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts were completely annihilated, and the Outer Sea demonic beasts who were originally native to the Endless Sea, returned to the Deep Sea. Although it could not be compared with the time when the Whale Clan dominated the Endless Sea, after the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts were eliminated, the Outer Sea demonic beasts would definitely expand rapidly. At least, within 5 years after the war, they would recover to a level that was not inferior to the Hengduan mountain range. This result was undoubtedly something that the natives of the Jianghu world would be happy to see. Just from the fact that Lin Yuan used the tiger skin of the ancient demon court to cover himself, the guardians of the Heaven Gate, who claimed to be the dominators, were full of fear of him and did not dare to attack the northern frontier easily. Judging from the situation, these natives might have challenged the experts from the untainted world more than once. It was just that in every previous battle these natives were the losers. Another possibility was that the Outer Sea demonic beasts were still suppressed by the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts and retreated to the Outer Sea demonic beasts. When they fought with the aquatic demonic beasts that now occupied the Outer Sea demonic beasts, the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts did not need to pay attention to them. Every year the Outer Sea demonic beasts would send a few troops to wipe out some of the Outer Sea demonic beasts. Even if they did not completely destroy the Outer Sea demonic beasts, within hundreds of years, the Outer Sea demonic beasts would definitely not be able to catch their breath, let alone continue to challenge the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts. Haha, as for hundreds of years later? When the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas invaded the Endless Sea, It was not more than 150 years since the whale clan was exiled and the dragon bloodline demonic beast spread. Now, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had become a synonym for power and nobility. Even if they were forced into a corner by the outer sea demonic beasts, in the end, the reason was because of their internal strife. If the outer sea demonic beasts were defeated, there would be no demonic beasts of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts in the endless sea. At a time like this, wouldn't it be crazy to get involved in these matters? This time, Lin Yuan had come to the endless sea with the intention of leaving the stage of the northern frontier to Li Zhong and the remaining members of the Jiao family. He wanted to see what they would choose in the end, and then decide what kind of attitude he would use to return to the northern frontier. Of course, using the existence of the city of trade to make a fortune in the endless sea was undoubtedly the best choice. But from the looks of it, these dragon bloodline demonic beasts had no intention of letting him make a fortune in secret. But on second thought it made sense. The Four Seas Dragon Tribe and the Siren Guild wouldn't fall out with each other for no reason. Besides, Lin Yuan, who came from the era of information explosion, knew very well that not all forces would tremble in fear and cower in fear under external pressure. On the contrary, the stronger the external pressure, the easier it was for the voices of discord within a certain force to disappear completely. First, they would work together to expel outsiders and settle the scores later. To the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, the outer sea demonic beasts were such a strong external pressure. In their eyes, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts were divided into different ranks. A pureblood dragon tribe's treatment was even better than those who had made great contributions to the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. This was also the biggest source of conflict in the Endless Sea. If it weren't for the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's way of doing things, there wouldn't be a series of forces like the Siren Guild and the Evil Dragon Tribe that opposed the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. However, in the eyes of outsiders, the Siren Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe were all dragon bloodline demonic beasts, and they all had to be destroyed. This was a war that would decide who would survive and who would be destroyed. In this kind of war, not to mention the two sides fighting for themselves, there shouldn't even be a little bit of friction. Otherwise, it would mean that they were afraid that the other side wouldn't be able to win, so they crazily gave the other side a chance. Lin Yuan's face darkened. He stared at the crab boss and said, "So, your president wants me to intervene and let the Siren Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe put down their current prejudice and defeat the outer sea demonic beasts first?" "Yes." The crab boss nodded slightly and said in a helpless tone, "You should know that such a low-level mistake is impossible for our president or the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's higher-ups to make. However, the opponent is very cunning, constantly provoking friction between us and the Pureblood Dragon Tribe. Now the two armies can no longer join forces. When facing the enemy, we even have to think about whether the other side will make things difficult for us. This has caused our overall strength to be inferior to the other side, and under the situation where we have been weakened once, we have to divide a considerable amount of people to guard against the positions of these allies. You should have seen it when you returned that the two armies are not only guarding against the outer sea demonic beast." Speaking up to this point, he paused and smiled bitterly. "Just by relying on the higher-ups of both sides, we definitely can't mediate the current conflict. Moreover, the higher-ups of both sides are not completely without grudges about this matter. Compared to the monster beasts at the bottom, we at most want to defeat the monster beasts in the outer sea first and then come back to settle the score." Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, and a dignified look flashed across his eyes. After a moment, Lin Yuan said, "I already understand your meaning, but you should know that I am not a person of virtue and prestige in the Endless Sea. Moreover, with the matter of the Great Wall of Willow Shire, I am afraid that many dragon blood demonic beasts will directly regard me as an enemy. Obviously, I am not suitable to be the mediator in your plan. This really wasn't a good job. If it was done well, the dragon blood demonic beasts would unite, and now that the outer sea demonic beasts were at odds with the god-worshipping religion, they might have a chance to destroy the outer sea demonic beasts. At the very least, they would be able to defeat them and regain control of the Great Wall of Willow Shire. However, if the dragon blood demonic beasts won, would it be a good thing? The so-called way of dominating, in the final analysis, was nothing more than two words: benefits and benefits. As the saying goes, lure with benefits and drive away with harm. The outer sea demonic beasts could provoke the conflict between the dragon race of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild. Perhaps they did not rely on any conspiracy or trickery, but on the original conflict between both sides to create such a situation. Just like what the crab boss had said, the higher-ups of both sides were not without grudges. The fundamental reason why they did not directly fall out with each other was that they were more aware of the danger of the outer sea demonic beasts. They planned to deal with the outer sea demonic beasts first and then solve the internal problems. Chapter 1186. Taking a step back, the Sea Monster Guild and the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas did have quite a big conflict. However, for both sides, the city of trade that Lin Yuan built in the Endless Sea was also a threat like the Outer Sea Monster Beast. After defeating the Outer Sea Monster Beasts, a similar settlement would also fall on the city of trade. This time he did not have the Outer Sea Monster Beast to rely on. He was afraid that the northern frontier did not have such strength to fight the Dragon Bloodline Monster Beasts head-on. Therefore, from Lin Yuan's point of view, he hoped that the Dragon Bloodline Monster Beasts would not win this battle. Of course, this premise was based on the premise that the Outer Sea Monster Beasts had nothing to do with the Heavenly Court. Otherwise, he would rather leave the Endless Sea than let the Heavenly Court, which was his sworn enemy, occupy the Endless Sea. Lin Yuan's nature was like this. As a businessman in his previous life, if he didn't have such a personality, he wouldn't have been able to turn his small workshop into a listed company even though he wasn't rich and didn't have a strong background. This was because most of the time he would rather not make money himself than snipe his opponents. Therefore, in the business world, most people were unwilling to make enemies with a weirdo like him. Of course, this was under the condition that he did a good job and successfully made the Sea Monster Guild and the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas work together to fight against the enemy. The other situation was even worse. As the Dragon of Sin, that helped the Outer Sea Monster Beast to take down the Great Wall of Willow, Lin Yuan might not be accepted by the Sea Monster Guild and the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas. Just like what Lin Yuan said, to do this job, it would either be a person of virtue and prestige who could convince both sides, or an existence that both sides would not dare to easily deal with even if they worked together. Lin Yuan obviously did not meet these conditions. In his opinion, the Sea Monster Guild was just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. Of course, this didn't mean that Lin Yuan couldn't do anything about it. He just didn't think that both sides would cooperate to that extent. Boss Crab waved his pincers helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "The problem now is not whether you think you can be the middleman to mediate the conflict between us and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. Instead, our president wants to see you. I believe you can also see that the Four Seas Dragon Tribe must be watching our every move, but I still managed to reach you without a hitch. This also means that the higher-ups of both sides are inclined to throw this mess to you." Speaking of this, it took a step back and the bitter smile on its face became more intense. It said, "Please come with me. Don't make things difficult for an errand boy like me, okay?" Boss Crab was very afraid of the Black Jiao's methods. Previously, the Four Seas Dragon Tribe had joined forces with the Sea Monster Guild to plot against the Black Jiao. Good lord, not long after, the Outer Sea Monsters had directly attacked the Deep Sea area. The Four Seas Dragon Tribe had spent countless resources and countless time to build the Willowstone Great Wall, but it didn't have much use at all. It was directly attacked by the Outer Sea Monsters. Now it had become the Outer Sea Monsters' headquarters. It was obvious that the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's painstaking efforts of countless generations of Dragon King would become a wedding dress for the Outer Sea Monsters. The current situation had already deteriorated to such a state. Unfortunately, the pureblood and mixed-blood dragons at the bottom of the hierarchy had been successfully instigated by the Outer Sea Monsters. Now both sides were no longer at the stage where they couldn't see eye to eye. Instead, as long as they found an opportunity, they would directly stab these allies in the back. In such a situation, if they had to think of someone who could break out of this situation, they could only think of the Black Jiao, who had a symbiotic relationship with Miracle. Lin Yuan took a deep breath, and his blue-white eyes flashed with an obscure light. After a while, he coldly stared at Boss Crab and smiled. "I've said it before. I'm not a person of virtue and prestige. If you try to make me mediate the problem between you, then I'm sorry, but this war will definitely be lost." This? Boss Crab stared blankly at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan and Boss Crab looked at each other and said with a smile, "And in this battle, you have made several fatal mistakes. Let me give you an example. You did not block information about the defeat of the Great Wall of Willow. This means that you did not give ideological guidance to the soldiers under your command at the right time. You did not let them feel that the demon beasts from the outer sea were evil and trying to destroy you. If you blocked the information about the battle intent of the Great Wall of Willow, and then deliberately exaggerated how miserable the sea area was when the demon beasts from the outer sea broke through, how the defenders of the Great Wall of Willow fought bravely when they were isolated and helpless. In the end, they were slaughtered one by the demon beasts from the outer sea, and their image was completely tainted. Then, the demon beasts from the outer sea would not be able to incite you at all. Not to mention whether your soldiers would listen to their instigation. Even if they saw them, they would have pounced on them and directly tore the demon beasts from the outer sea to shreds. For someone like Lin Yuan who had come from an era of information explosion, he knew a bit about all kinds of military strategies. He also had some understanding of all kinds of classic battles. Adding on the existence of the communication network and transportation formations, even if his military accomplishments weren't high, it was enough for him to beat these natives of the martial heaven world. That was because with the support of the system and the Joss flames, Lin Yuan was able to easily achieve things that those famous generals in history could only achieve if they had the right time, place, and people. He had achieved impossible victories. In the martial heaven world, when it came to the art of war, people like Lei Qiuxing, Yan Xingqi, and Zhao Xiang could be said to be unparalleled in the country. At most, they could only wrestle with Lin Yuan. If they really fought, it was hard to say whether they would be a match for Lin Yuan. For example, in the weak Song dynasty, even the emperor and important ministers were in a situation where they were in favor of peace and surrender. Even people like Yu Fei and Han Shizhong, who were known as national heroes, were able to pull out elite troops that could make the Jin dynasty throw away their armor. This involved the ideological education of an army. Only by making the soldiers hate the other side, wanting nothing more than to eat the other side's flesh and blood, could they achieve a series of victories in a situation where they were at an absolute disadvantage. Clearly, the dragon bloodline demonic beast score in this aspect was 0. Could even be said to be negative. It was crazily giving the other side a chance to counterattack. This is indeed our problem. Although the crab boss wasn't a soldier, he was able to become one of the people in charge of the Sea Demon Guild. His foresight and shrewdness couldn't be too bad. So when Lin Yuan's voice sounded, he realized that if they had followed Lin Yuan's plan from the start, then the outer sea demonic beasts wouldn't have been able to successfully sow discord between them. Chapter 1187. So, now that I've finished talking about your first mistake, I think you should have realized why you are now being forced to this point by the outer sea monsters. So, let's talk about your second mistake. Your army seems to be powerful, but in fact there is no unified commander. In other words, there is no commander among you who can convince both armies. No, that's not quite accurate. To be precise, not to mention both sides, even the Sea Monster Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Clan have different opinions in their own army system. This is because you have never established a suitable reward system. Even the demonic beasts who have made great contributions to the dragon bloodline demonic beasts will not receive appropriate rewards. In other words, even those who have made no contributions to the dragon bloodline demonic beasts will receive the best treatment and the highest status as long as their bloodline is pure enough. In such a system, your biggest problem is internal discord. For example, the commander who guarded the Willowstone Great Wall was a good general, but he could only command his own soldiers. Once things got out of control, all kinds of voices in the entire army would erupt, forcing him to make a decision that he knew was wrong. Don't doubt it. The Great Wall of Willowstone was lost because of this problem. Your current situation is also a factor of this problem. To put it simply, your military system is too chaotic. You don't have a unified commander. When you set up camp, you might not see any problems, but once you leave the camp and start fighting, military orders will definitely not be smooth. At that time, you will definitely fight your own battles. For example, some people want to chase, some want to withdraw, some want to retreat, and some want to clean up the battlefield. Therefore, the problem you have to solve now is not only to mediate the internal conflicts, but also to ensure that all the soldiers under your command have a unified commander. You have to eliminate all the voices of discord within the army. You must know that in order to become an officer in the Northern Region Army, you have to go to the Northern Military Academy to study, and the first lesson they learn is, military orders must be obeyed. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, the so-called military orders are like mountains. In other words, the orders issued by the commander are like an unshakable mountain. No matter what the order is, as long as you receive it, you must execute it. Even if you are crushed under this mountain, you can't complain at all. But I'm sorry to say that I don't see any military accomplishment from you at all. On the contrary, the outer sea monster beasts are united and harmonious. It's obvious that they have similar actions. Boss Crab took 2 steps back and looked at Lin Yuan with fear. It did not dare to speak, nor did it know what it could say. The Endless Sea had always been an abnormal place. In this place, no matter if it was strength or merit, they couldn't compare to the bloodline. The situation on the Siren Guild side was actually a little better, but they were a loosely structured organization, so there were many times when they couldn't reach a consensus. When things came to a head, they would all do their own thing. The situation on the Four Seas Dragon Tribe side was even more ridiculous. Every one of them was using their pure bloodline to suppress others. Even a weakling who didn't even dare to see blood could become a commander. As for those with mixed bloodlines, even if they were war artists, they had to obediently serve as cannon fodder. To put it bluntly, these were the problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts were facing. And just as Lin Yuan said, these problems were fatal. But he couldn't change it. The Endless Sea had been like this for so many years. Even if they were aware of the problem, how could they change it just because they wanted to? Lin Yuan tilted his head and suddenly changed the topic. He said, "Your eyes tell me that the problems I mentioned do exist, and you are aware of these problems. But the despair hidden in your eyes also tells me that even if you are aware of these problems, you can't change it." Speaking of this, he paused and revealed a mocking smile. He added, "So, the current situation is that in this war you have no chance of turning the tables. I suggest you pack up and give up on the Endless Sea." Gulp. Boss Crab swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His face was still filled with shock. After a while, Boss Crab said faintly, "If we do as you say and solve these problems, can we win this war and eliminate all the outer sea monster beasts?" Ah. Lin Yuan sneered twice. Then, he threw the dragon tail on the table in front of him and said, "You may have misunderstood my words. I'm just telling you that these are the fatal problems of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. If you change it, you may not win this war. But if you don't change it, then I'm sorry, but you will definitely lose." The Qianwu world's study of the art of war was very shallow, but Lin Yuan was not like that. Lin Yuan could see that the outer sea monster beasts had completely given up on their territory. Even the tribes of the outer sea monster beasts that were originally fighting against each other were now united. It was obvious that they were going to cut off all means of retreat. From the moment the Great Wall of Willowstone was breached, this war had already decided that either the outer sea monster beasts or the dragon bloodline demonic beasts would completely withdraw from the stage of the Endless Sea. If the situation was more serious, it was possible that one of them would be completely destroyed. This is your third problem. Until now, you all think that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts have only suffered a small loss and that victory is still within your grasp. Even after realizing your own problems, you still have the illusion that as long as you make some changes, you can easily win against the outer sea monster beasts? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smashed his dragon tail on the table. He sneered and said, "Bullshit. Dream on. You have cerebral palsy. I can tell you responsibly right now that the side that is truly at a disadvantage in this war has never been the outer sea monster beast. If you change the problems that have existed in the past and only clean up the internal atmosphere so that you have the strength to fight against the outer sea monster beasts, even if you really do that, you only have a 40% chance of winning this war." Speaking up to here, Lin Yuan let out a long breath and added, "Boss Crab, you are the person in charge of the Sea Monster Guild in the City of Commerce. Although we didn't get along well before, no matter what, you are still half my people. So if you are willing to cooperate, I don't mind protecting your life. As for the rest, you can forget about it. That's all. Relay my words to your president. It's up to you to decide whether you want to stay or leave." Chapter 1188. Lin Yuan's words were indeed not alarmist. The battle between the dragon blood beasts and the beasts from the outer sea was no longer evenly matched. The beasts from the outer sea had already gained the upper hand. If it were not for the greed of the strange man who did not cooperate with the god-worship sect and insisted on involving the heavenly court, the army from the outer sea would have already started to invade the other seas instead of just stopping at the Great Wall of Willowstone. However, even a wise man would make a mistake. No one could truly make a perfect plan. Many times, a small change in the details could lead the whole thing to another direction. Just like how the strange man tried to use the power of the heavenly court to kick the god-worship sect out of the competition, the result was self-defeating. Even Lin Yuan, a bystander who knew a lot of karma, couldn't see who was the winner at the end of the game at this moment. The crab boss took a deep breath, looked at Lin Yuan with a complicated expression and said helplessly, "Dragon King, in this chaotic world, no one can stay out of trouble. Previously, the Dragon Tribe and the Sea Monster Union joined hands to deal with you. How can you be sure that after the dragon blood beasts are defeated, the beasts from the outer sea will not deal with you? For them, they have lived for countless years in order to take back the position of the overlord of the Endless Sea. Now that they can use you, of course they will say good things. However, if the dragon blood beasts are defeated, I am afraid that they will turn against you faster than anyone else. You know that's not the case. Lin Yuan smiled and said with a deep voice, however, compared to the dragon blood beasts, this king believes more in the beasts from the outer sea who have been friendly to this king. After the beasts from the outer sea dominate the endless sea, it is still unknown whether they will attack this king or not. However, once the dragon blood beasts pass this hurdle, I am afraid that the first thing you will deal with is this king, right? The crab boss was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his head and said with a bitter smile, an existence like you will not stay under others for a long time. No matter who is the overlord of the endless sea, sooner or later they will have to fight with you. I have heard this from the president before I came to see you. Oh, Lin Yuan replied with great interest. He even purposely lengthened his voice as if he was interested in the president of the Siren Guild that he had never met before. Boss Crab muttered to himself for a moment as if he was organizing his words. Then he continued, however, our Sea Monster Guild has never wanted to fight for the position of the overlord of the Endless Sea. You should be able to see that we are just an idle guild. Otherwise, based on the fact that we have the power to fight against the dragon tribe of the Four Seas, they would not have allowed us to exist until now. Our attitude towards you can actually change. The president's intention is for the Siren Guild to take out 40% of the profits in exchange for 40% of the profits in the City of Trade. This way your position in the Siren Guild will be second only to the president, and we will also treat you as one of our own. Looking at Lin Yuan's thoughtful expression, the crab boss added, also the president said that you might choose to stay out of this at this time. Therefore he can promise to hand over the highest command of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts to you. If you want more authority, I think you'll have to meet our president. Wow, what a big deal. Even though Lin Yuan had already made up his mind, he could not help but raise his eyebrows at this moment. The dragon tribe of the Four Seas and the Siren Guild had already started an internal conflict. However, the dragon tribe of the Four Seas did not interfere when the Siren Guild asked him to mediate. This meant that the higher-ups of the dragon tribe of the Four Seas were also inclined to let him handle this matter. Even before this, the two sides had already reached some kind of agreement. The problems that Lin Yuan had mentioned before were all real, and they were not difficult to detect. It was precisely because of these problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had started to decline after dominating the Endless Sea. After all, the dragon tribe was a very strange creature. They did not have any reproductive isolation with any other species. Furthermore, to the dragon tribe of the Great Desolate World, as long as they had the dragon bloodline, they would be a member of the dragon tribe. They would only call them different names based on their appearance and habits. For example, Flood Dragon, Alligator, and so on. However, the dragon clan of the Heaven Martial World just had to play some tricks. They created a pure-blooded dragon clan. In the deep sea, there were sea monsters that were obviously different from the dragon clan. They obviously had the dragon clan's bloodline, but they still called them Red Crab, Brave Crab, and so on. It was as if the dragon clan of the Four Seas had the purest dragon clan's bloodline. If these creatures were placed in the desolate world, they would at most be at the Flood Dragon clan's level. As the saying goes, a bucket of water does not make a sound, but a bucket of water does. However, this was the problem and there was no way to solve it. This was because the dragon tribe of the Endless Sea had always done this. Once it involved reforms, it would definitely violate the interests of many people. If it really came to that, the demonic beasts of the outer sea would not even need to attack. The demonic beasts of the outer sea would be able to destroy themselves. For example, Lin Yuan had made so many reforms. He had killed so many aristocratic families in the northern frontier that they did not dare to raise their heads. He had killed so many sects in the northern frontier that they disbanded. However, the current northern frontier was still very chaotic and heterogeneous. Once there was any negligence, someone would cause trouble. However, the problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts could not solve themselves could be thrown to Lin Yuan to solve. This was because Lin Yuan was now an extremely special existence in the Jianghu world. Whether it was his personal strength or his military accomplishments, he could be considered an existence that was unparalleled in the world. Unless the true old monsters of the Heavenly Gate Guardians appeared, no one would be able to suppress his limelight. Therefore, it was not unacceptable for the dragon bloodline demonic beasts to hand over command to Lin Yuan. On the contrary, ever since Lin Yuan had appeared, he had never lost a battle no matter what difficulties he faced. This was like a shot of cardiac stimulant, instantly giving the dragon bloodline demonic beasts a huge boost of morale. Moreover, Lin Yuan's philosophy of using people had always been, the capable would go up, the mediocre would give way, and the mediocre would be demoted. Perhaps other commanders would have scruples about which clan the demonic beasts under their command came from, the cultivation level of their parents, the purity of their bloodline, and what level they could reach in the future. However, Lin Yuan would not care about this. In Lin Yuan's eyes, a genius who would die in a day could not even compare to a fool who could live for 100 years. A potential that could not be realized in a short period of time had no potential. Therefore, without sufficient strength, no matter how pure their bloodline was, they would only be cannon fodder in Lin Yuan's eyes. Furthermore, no demonic beasts would dare to raise any objections. Chapter 1189. This was because the current war was a huge catastrophe for the dragon bloodline demonic beasts as a group. Under such circumstances, there was not a single dragon bloodline demonic beast that did not wish to win this war. After all, the immediate gains and losses were better than direct extermination of their clan or even becoming slaves of the outer sea demonic beasts. They could still tell which was more important. As for the higher-ups of both sides, they did not need to pay anything. They only needed to let Lin Yuan govern for a period of time, and they would naturally get used to this style of governance. After defeating the outer sea demonic beasts, the higher-ups of both sides did not even need to do anything to continue this style of governance and correct it at the smallest cost. This was because, given Lin Yuan's character, when some dragon bloodline demonic beasts insisted on going against him, there was no doubt that they would carry out all kinds of dangerous missions until the battle ended or they were killed. Even if there were some who did not go against Lin Yuan and wanted to wait until the outer sea demonic beasts were pacified before carrying out the restoration, it did not matter. This was because under Lin Yuan's governance style, there would inevitably be a group of people with mixed bloodlines but outstanding abilities who would benefit from the benefits. With such a group, no matter how much trouble the dragon bloodline demonic beasts could cause, they would eventually be completely annihilated. Even for the higher-ups of both sides, this was a kind of check and balance. Interesting. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and suddenly said with a smile, "Unfortunately, I'm not interested in this supreme command. Even if you give me this power verbally, what can I do if those dragon bloodline demonic beasts don't listen to me?" At this point, Lin Yuan had already slightly squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I roughly understand what you mean. Now that the water is too muddy, I have to wait and see before deciding whether to participate or not. However, before I really take action, I can help you with some trivial matters. I don't want the so-called supreme command. As for the specific needs, I will contact you again. As for your president, I'm not interested in meeting him now. That's it. This king is tired." Compared to the information from the information explosion era in his mind, the current endless sea was actually somewhat similar to the Sui dynasty. Although the comments of the later generations about the Sui dynasty were not very good, the real Sui dynasty was undeniably prosperous. Even before Wu Ziqian, Yang Jian and Yang Guang had already turned the Sui dynasty into the overlord of East Asia. Compared to Li Shimin's later generation where the godfather gave out money, but the fools didn't come, the Sui dynasty and the Wu Zhou dynasty were the real times when all the countries came to pay their respects. The so-called rule of Zhenguan and the 24 meritorious officials of the Lingyan Pavilion were a joke in the eyes of those who truly understood history. Qing Yaojin, Yu Qigong, Qin Xiong, Wei Zheng, and the other officials and generals who had been in the limelight during the Sui dynasty were basically invisible existences. Even the founder of the Great Tang, Li Yuan, who could be considered top-notch in all aspects, was only a minor governor of Jinyang in Yang Guang's hands. This was because the Sui dynasty was the peak of the great clans, and rare talents in other eras were as common as cabbages in the Sui dynasty. Li Shimin's batch were all eliminated products of the Sui dynasty, and some of them could not even be considered eliminated products. Just like the various sea demon clans in the Endless Sea, the brave crab tribe such as Tai Mu was only a branch of the crab tribe, and it was a relatively weak branch, but it still had 3 demon kings. From this, it could be seen that the real powerful clans had a lot of resources, not to mention the situation of the dragon tribe of the 4 seas from the untainted world. Not to mention the 6 dragon gods, even the 9 sons of the dragon were enough to make all the clans in the Endless Sea pale. Adding the other demon kings without titles, they were just like stars in the sky. Lin Yuan could help the Endless Sea change the current situation, and this was something that had been done before. During the Sui dynasty, the real military god Yang Su had done something similar. Moreover, Yang Su, who was regarded by later generations as someone who was hard to distinguish between a loyal and a traitor, was a real top talent in the Sui dynasty. Even the military god of the Tang dynasty, Li Jing, was just a primary school student in front of Yang Su, and he had even received guidance from Yang Su. Yang Su emphasized the word ruthless when training troops. To give a specific example, after Yang Guang succeeded the throne, the king of Han Yang Liang rebelled. Relying on Yang Jian's favoritism for his youngest son, Yang Liang directly took out 300,000 troops. At that time Yang Guang only had 100,000 troops in his hands. Among these 100,000 troops, Yang Guang only gave Yang Su 40,000 troops. This was a typical example of using and defending at the same time. At the same time he let Yang Su send troops to pacify Yang Liang, and at the same time he hinted to Yang Su, "I still have 60,000 troops in my hands. If you have any other thoughts, you'd better consider whether you're my opponent." Therefore Yang Su led 40,000 troops to take the initiative to attack Yang Liang, and Yang Liang's side directly made a confusing move. 300,000 troops against Yang Su's 40,000 troops, and Yang Liang's move was to defend the city and not come out. Just based on this matter, one could see how fierce Yang Su's reputation was. After all, before this, Yang Su had experienced 3 dynasties and countless battles. He rarely lost in his life. Whether it was internal or external battles, Yang Su could be called an expert. Even when facing the Turkic Khagan, who fought until Li Shimin bit his toothpick and made the Wei River alliance, Yang Su's troops could not wait to take a detour. When Yang Guang went out to the grasslands, the Turkic Khagan even cut off the flesh on his leg and offered it to Yang Guang to show his loyalty. When Yang Su used his troops, he was basically sending his soldiers to their deaths. Moreover, he used his actions to tell these soldiers that they either had to listen to his orders and fight the enemy or they didn't have the guts to go, and he would directly kill them as a sacrifice before personally fighting the enemy. In this way of leading a troop that was filled with the smell of blood, the troops under Yang Su were not afraid of death at all. Even if they were hit by a blade on the battlefield, as long as they didn't die on the spot, they could still laugh and return the blade to the enemy. It was also because of this battle style that Yang Su's opponents didn't dare to face him directly when they heard his name. Even so, Yang Su was still the most popular general in the Sui dynasty. Those Sui dynasty soldiers racked their brains and all wanted to be the suicide squad under Yang Su. This was because when looking at the entire Sui dynasty, the aristocratic families were extremely powerful. The civil officials and generals were all people from aristocratic families. At that time, just Lin Yuan alone was able to nurture people like Li Shimin, Li Jianqing, Li Xiaoning and so on. The other aristocratic families were not weak either. Not to mention the grassroots, even those from humble backgrounds could not easily make a name for themselves in that era. Unless you really had the ability of a war immortal, or a strategy saint. Chapter 1190. However, Yang Su was different from the other aristocratic families. All the soldiers under his command could receive reasonable rewards. If they died on the battlefield while carrying out Yang Su's deadly missions, Yang Su would ensure that their families received reasonable compensation. If they were lucky enough to survive, then Yang Su would also ask for credit for them, ensuring that they could be promoted, get rich and bring benefits to their descendants. In the feudal dynasty, the relationship between the famous generals and the emperor was the most harmonious and the least harmonious because the emperor had to sit in the imperial court regardless of whether he could lead the troops or not. He could not personally lead the troops every time there was a war, so he had to raise those generals who could fight and dared to fight to ensure that he would not be defeated by the enemy after a war. However, the existence of these generals was a threat to the imperial power that could not be underestimated. Countless examples of mutiny, seizing power, rebelling, and seizing power could be found in the history books. Therefore, most emperors were in a state of absolute vigilance against the generals under their command. From the perspective of the soldiers, they did not care who was sitting on the dragon throne. They only cared about whether they could eat their fill, how many merits they could achieve in the next war, whether they would die on the battlefield, and so on. Therefore, in the eyes of ordinary soldiers, an outstanding general was much more desirable than the emperor. Whether the emperor died or not did not have much to do with them. However, whether the general was powerful or not, it was directly related to their vital interests. Except for the Song dynasty. Zhao Kuangyin, the founder of the Song dynasty, was indeed a character. He could fight on horseback and rule the country when he was dismounted. Even because of his existence, the military power in the hands of the generals was weakened to the extreme. After all, Zhao Kuangyin knew military affairs and how to fight. From all aspects, if the generals had any tricks, Zhao Kuangyin could understand what was going on. Therefore, after he held all the military power in his hands, he could also ensure that the military power of the Song dynasty was still strong. However, the problem was that the only emperor of the Song dynasty who could do this was Zhao Kuangyin. None of the later emperors of the Song dynasty had this kind of ability, but they still maintained this kind of strong and weak leadership model, resulting in the generals not knowing the soldiers, and the soldiers not knowing the generals. Only at the last moment would they decide which general would lead which army. The consequence of this kind of approach was that the Song dynasty, under the circumstances of being rich all over the world, had done the best in all aspects of military. The source of soldiers, equipment and training were all not bad, but they could not win the war. In the end, their backbone was broken and they still did not know where they went wrong. The Song dynasty emperors and generals were not so incompatible because the generals of the Song dynasty were not a threat to the imperial power at all. Even the soldiers of the Song dynasty had to have their arms and faces tattooed. At that time, those who had their arms and faces tattooed were basically local ruffians and even criminals. It was tantamount to directly hitting the social status of the soldiers directly to the lowest level. Even the famous general of the northern Song dynasty, Di Qing, did not escape. Later, when Di Qing went to war, he basically wore a mask. What Lin Yuan wanted to do in the Endless Sea, he only needed to imitate Jianghu. After all, the Endless Sea was already very deformed. Even the almighty immortals could not directly change the Endless Sea. Therefore, Lin Yuan had to use this method to quickly cultivate a group of people who already benefited from it. He had to tell the demonic beasts in the Endless Sea that bloodline did not mean anything. Only with meritorious deeds could one get a reasonable reward. Firstly, these new nobles of the Endless Sea would quickly form a group headed by Lin Yuan to fight against those demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines who wanted to be superior in the Endless Sea purely based on their bloodline. Secondly, if there was such an interest group, Lin Yuan would quickly become a new nobleman in the Endless Sea, and he would be able to rope in more and more demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines to work for him. When this interest group formed, the demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines would try to divide the city of trade. At that time, it would depend on whether the Dragon King of the Endless Sea or the Dragon King of the Northern Frontier was more powerful. What's more, doing this could indeed change the deformed situation of the Endless Sea. As for whether they would be forced to retreat after they succeeded, perhaps the higher-ups of the demonic beasts with dragon bloodlines really thought so. However, to Lin Yuan, the wishful thinking of the higher-ups of the demonic beasts was as laughable as a child showing off his cleverness to an adult. The dragon race of the Four Seas had 6 dragon gods in the Jianghu world. Now 2 of them were dead and 1 was injured. However, even so, no demonic beast dared to touch those territories that had lost their masters. No matter what they did, once they reached a certain level of status, they were not existences that could be changed at will. It was just like how the emperor could not wait to eat their flesh and sleep on their skin. The emperor could only pinch his nose and persuade them again and again. If it really didn't work, the emperor could only put on an act and beg them to come back and be an official after a period of time. No matter how hateful these officials were, they were still an important part of the imperial court. Therefore, the emperor could only overthrow the officials. If the emperor casually laid his hands on the officials, the entire imperial court might collapse because of it. Moreover, with the special privilege of the Confucian school of thought, the emperor actually had no excuse to lay his hands on the officials. If they formed a new interest group according to Lin Yuan's idea, even if Lin Yuan didn't take on the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, he would still be an irreplaceable existence. This was because the abnormalities of the Endless Sea had not just happened in a day or two. Whether these demonic beasts who had gone from marginal status to nobility with great difficulty believed in Lin Yuan, the Dragon King who had brought them hope, or the Dragon King of the Four Seas who judged heroes based on their bloodline was obviously a question that didn't require much thought. Therefore, Lin Yuan's disdain for the methods of the Inhumans was not purely because the Inhumans had screwed up. Most of the time, a qualified political strategist would not introduce external forces to break the game. They would be able to do whatever they wanted on the existing chessboard to make themselves invincible or to become the final winner. If those methods of driving the wolf to devour the tiger and borrowing other forces were used in political tactics, they would basically be the last fight that could not be turned back. Those were the methods that only losers would use. However, some people would still think that these methods were brilliant and powerful. How could this not make people laugh? Even if he were in the position of the Inhumans, he would also find ways to cause a fight between the Dragon God Temple and the God Worship religion, instead of using the God Worship religion to kick them aside and then introducing the Heavenly Court to wrestle with the God Worship religion. He thought that he could win the game by doing this, but he had never thought that no matter in the eyes of any forces, he, the Inhumans, was a bad collaborator, a stinky fish that had to be kicked out. To put it bluntly, if he couldn't even play these chess pieces on the field, then he would continue to add more chess pieces to it. If he wasn't a fool, what else could he be? Chapter 1191. Time passed by bit. Along with the cold that almost froze the endless sea, the endless disputes in the endless sea finally ushered in a short period of peace. At the same time, this also meant that Lin Yuan had been in this world for 4 years. During this period of time, Lin Yuan only stayed in the endless sea and did not meet with the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. However, he gathered a large number of capable dragon bloodline demonic beasts that were not valued because of their impure bloodline. Of course, there were also some demonic beasts that tried to make up the numbers and come under Lin Yuan. After all, under the lobbying of Jiao 1 and Cyrus, the City of Trade had become the largest trading platform in the Endless Sea. Who knew how many demonic beasts begged to find a job in the City of Trade? Moreover, the City of Trade was not just on the right track. The originally vast City of Trade had never placed goods from the northern frontier. After all, Lin Yuan, the northern frontier, and the City of Trade could not run away. The demonic beasts or cultivators that came to shop only needed to state what they needed at the counter and come to pick it up at the appointed time. Or the Sea Demon Guild's logistics team could deliver it to their doorstep. The vacated positions were naturally not idle. Therefore, under the guidance of Lin Yuan, Jiao Yi deliberately attracted a lot of caravans or individual investors to settle in the City of Trade. It was almost effortless for him to pull the City of Trade to a unique level. Its scope of influence was not even limited to a few sea areas. Due to the existence of the teleportation array and the logistics team, doing business with the City of Trade was almost no different from online shopping except for the fact that one had to personally place an order. Therefore, just like Lin Yuan's idea, the City of Trade defeated the markets of other sea areas effortlessly. Even the caravans that wandered around the endless sea areas had to give up their originally lucrative business and transport the specialties of their own sea areas to the City of Trade to sell. Today, Lin Yuan could almost be a hands-off shopkeeper because in this case, even if he did not sell any goods, just the rent from the demonic beasts rental shops and the 5% transaction tax after the transaction was completed was enough for him to make a lot of money. Moreover, Lin Yuan had an advantage that other sea demons could not compare to. With the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce as his backing, whether it was the storage of goods or the rare treasures that the endless sea demons could not get, it was a piece of cake for Lin Yuan. Just as Lin Yuan had expected, the City of Trade, which had officially started to make a profit, began to recover the losses of the northern frontier. The goods that were continuously sent from the Endless Sea to the northern frontier not only greatly relieved the financial pressure of the northern frontier, but it also relied on the unique marine phase and deep-sea mineral deposits in the Endless Sea to increase the profits of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce by leaps and bounds again. However, while Lin Yuan was happy, the other forces were not so happy. However, the dragon bloodline demonic beasts still had to rely on Lin Yuan to compete with the outer sea demons. Even if they were greedy, they did not dare to touch him. As for the outer sea demons, it was even more strange. On one hand, they were trading with the northern frontier or the City of Trade, and on the other hand they were fighting with the new interest groups under Lin Yuan's command. These outer sea demons were not lying when they hoped that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce would open in the coastal area. After all, although the outer sea demons were rich in all kinds of resources, the outer sea demons could not be compared with the outer sea demons. Therefore, in terms of foundation, the outer sea demons were much weaker. Now that they needed a lot of resources, how could they turn a blind eye to the City of Trade just because they wanted to support the enemy in the trade fair? However, the main point of this matter was that the outer sea demons only hoped that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce would open in the coastal and riverside areas. It did not mean that they could tolerate Lin Yuan building a City of Trade in the Endless Sea and extending the influence of the northern frontier to the Endless Sea. Therefore, the outer sea demons' attitude toward Lin Yuan was still mostly anger and resentment. Of course, the most unhappy ones were the demonic beasts that took advantage of the current chaotic situation to run to Lin Yuan's command. They originally thought that even if they were not as good as the gray-scaled flood dragon person, a tribe that was related to Lin Yuan by blood, they would not be inferior to the brave crab tribe, right? In the end, Lin Yuan did not even look at these demonic beasts that were just there to make up the numbers. Basically, if they were really strong and had a big background, Lin Yuan would not even bother to speak to them. Compared to the brave crab tribe? Were they worthy? After Tai O joined, Although he did not achieve a record of sweeping the endless sea for Lin Yuan, he could still be considered loyal and devoted. Moreover, he did not join the northern frontier after the northern frontier became powerful. Instead, when the northern frontier had just fallen out with the dragon clan of the Four Seas, he had already contacted the northern frontier. When the other forces were still watching, Tai O led his tribe to join the northern frontier. Just by casually jumping ship, they wanted to be compared to the brave crab tribe. Lin Yuan was not sure if other people could do such an anti-intellectual behavior, but he definitely could not do it. Moreover, these demonic beasts that were just there to make up the numbers did not even mix into the city of trade until they died. Almost during the first and second missions, they were almost completely annihilated. Their own strength was one reason. However, most of them did not take Lin Yuan's task seriously at all. What would happen if they carried out a task that had a slim chance of survival with a playful mentality? Obviously, it was also a matter that did not need to be elaborated. After all, if Lin Yuan wanted to cultivate his own interest group, the first thing he had to do was to have enough merits. Otherwise, how could he find the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts and ask for a large number of benefits to reward these demonic beasts that were not valued because of their bloodline? Within a few months, it was needless to say how difficult and dangerous it was to make a contribution that even the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, who valued their bloodline, were speechless. However, these difficult missions also quickly made Lin Yuan have an irreplaceable position in the hearts of these new dignitaries. After all, they were the ones who personally experienced and even carried out these missions. Compared to Lin Yuan's command and the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, they were very clear in their hearts that if the commander was not Lin Yuan, they would definitely be dead. After becoming the new dignitaries of the Endless Sea, they could not betray their own class. On the contrary, they had to continue to shine and maintain their persona in order to seek better development. They could not let the Endless Sea return to the previous situation where heroes were judged by their bloodline, because in that case they would lose everything they had now, which was something they could not accept. But maintaining their persona also meant that they had to obey the command. Chapter 1192. If they obeyed Lin Yuan's command and carried out those dangerous missions, they would gain something regardless of whether they succeeded or failed. If they completed the mission, they would get a bigger territory and more resources. Even if they failed, their clan would get a generous pension. But to obey the command of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts? Forget it then. They were all demonic beasts that made a living in the Endless Sea, who didn't know each other's background. These new dignitaries were able to seize the general trend of the new era and become the new dignitaries of the Endless Sea. Naturally, they weren't fools. They knew clearly that no matter what kind of promise they made, they had already become a member of a huge new interest group. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts were used to being superior. It was impossible for them to watch such a big power fall into the hands of an existence other than themselves. Therefore, they would definitely stand out and compete with Lin Yuan for this power. However, who didn't know the temperament of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts aristocrats? It was also a mission with a slim chance of survival. If the mission was successful under the command of a dragon bloodline demon beast nobleman, the credit would basically go to the nobleman. Since they were the real adventurers, the nobleman was already kind enough to give them 1/10 of the reward. If they failed, they would naturally be the scapegoats. Not only would the species behind them not receive any compensation, they might even be ripped off. Therefore, during this period of time with the arrival of winter, the wind and clouds in the Endless Sea began to fade. However, the undercurrent in the hearts of the demonic beasts became more and more majestic. This was also the situation that Lin Yuan had expected from the beginning. No matter how nice the dragon bloodline demonic beasts sounded, when they saw the benefits that were within reach, they would still grab it regardless of the overall situation. It was the same logic as when there was a jujube but no jujube. If they didn't get a share of Lin Yuan's benefits, they would still plan for the next opportunity. If they got a share of the benefits, they would probably push Lin Yuan out of the Endless Sea. But in this case, these dragon bloodline demonic beasts would fall into the trap of this game. Plus, was fighting for the authority something Lin Yuan needed? Obviously not. He just wanted to make the Endless Sea more and more muddy, so that he and the gray-scaled flood dragon person could have a more stable footing. It would naturally be good if he could obtain the loyalty of this group of new interest groups. It would be quite beneficial for stabilizing his position, but it was only a benefit. Lin Yuan had never thought that he could really rely on these dragon bloodline demonic beasts. Simply put, Lin Yuan was able to form this interest group and get these dragon bloodline demonic beasts to work for him only because of benefits. However, if they could be loyal to him for benefits, they would definitely betray him for benefits. This was without a doubt. However, the current situation had already been set. There was already a rift between the new interest group and the original bloodline nobility clans. Although it couldn't compare to the deep hatred between the Outer Sea demonic beasts and the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, it still involved the interests of their own race. The dragon bloodline demonic beasts couldn't fall out with the interest group before dealing with the Outer Sea demonic beasts. Otherwise, once a conflict broke out, it wouldn't just be a tripartite confrontation. Instead, this new interest group would directly join forces with the Outer Sea demonic beasts and wipe out the so-called bloodline nobility clans. In addition, Lin Yuan's unshakable position in the new interest group meant that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts couldn't touch him at all. If they wanted to target Lin Yuan, they would have to deal with the interest group first. At this juncture, the existence of this interest group was their biggest trump card against the Outer Sea demonic beasts. Even if they had the ability to destroy it, they wouldn't really do so. The current relationship between the interest group and Lin Yuan can be described as unbreakable. If they fall out one day in the future, it must be because the interest group has become strong enough to compete with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the Siren Guild. Of course, the higher-ups of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts wouldn't really destroy this interest group in a fit of rage. What did that have to do with Lin Yuan? This was just an internal conflict between the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. Lin Yuan could just wave his hand and leave the endless sea with the gray-scaled flood dragon person. When the dragon bloodline demonic beasts were destroyed by the Outer Sea demonic beasts, he estimated that the northern frontier would become an unshakable power in the Jianghu continent. At that time, it would be even easier to invade the endless sea. To the humans, the internal conflict between the demonic beasts was much more suitable than the northern frontier suppressing them. Not only would they not be a burden to Lin Yuan, but there might even be a group of existences that were scared out of their wits by the northern frontier that would fully support Lin Yuan's conquest of the endless sea. Fight? How could they fight? Lin Yuan wasn't a part of the situation at all. Although he had participated in this series of events, he would at most lose a few gray-scaled flood dragon people. Later on, he would grit his teeth and pay a large amount of incense power to create an even more prosperous empire of gray-scaled flood dragon people. However, regardless of the outcome of the arrangements in the Endless Sea, it wouldn't affect Lin Yuan's power in the northern frontier. Furthermore, the demonic beasts in the Endless Sea were strong. However, if they had the ability to kill Lin Yuan, it would be a fool's dream. Even if Lin Yuan were to stay in the Endless Sea and wait for them to kill him, they would have to ask Hanba, Hongyun, Luoyu and a series of other traders from the chaotic world if they were willing to do so. There were also those clowns from the Heavenly Court. Although Lin Yuan was challenging them on the surface, in the end this wasn't the desolate world. They weren't that strong. Just like how the Heavenly Gate Guardian had handed the trouble of the Sky Demon to Lin Yuan to deal with, those traders couldn't wait for Lin Yuan to deal with these immortals from the Heavenly Court. However, if Lin Yuan couldn't hold on, would the Heavenly Gate Guardian not personally deal with the Sky Demon? Or would these traders, who had chosen to live in seclusion for some unknown reason, just watch as Hongjun extended his hand into the Sky Martial world? Lin Yuan was currently in a lot of trouble. However, at the end of the day, these troubles weren't his. He had only been pushed out to be a cannon. Now, if he said that he couldn't hold on anymore, he would just lie down and do nothing. Naturally, there would be someone to deal with these troubles. Lin Yuan didn't do that because there was still a ruthless force in his bones. In addition, there was the existence of this system. Sooner or later, he would have to face existences like Hongjun. If he didn't even dare to fight against Hongjun's minions, he would find a time to kill himself. Perhaps he would still have a complete corpse. The real trouble for Lin Yuan, other than those clowns who were causing trouble in the dark side of the northern frontier, was that the Great Era was coming. The three realms were about to be completed. The treasure that could threaten Hongjun was about to be born. Perhaps soon Lin Yuan would have to face Ancestor Yang Mei, sect leader Tong Tian, Taoist Hong Yun, and the other powerful beings of the desolate world. Chapter 1193. In the City of Trade. Flood Dragon 1 stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands down. There was a hint of tiredness in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "Dragon King, I heard that the Jianghu continent is not very peaceful now. It is said that there are two experts in Buddhism and Taoism who have turned into demons. One of them is in the Withered Wood Empire." He claimed that he had seen a true immortal and was bestowed with immortal techniques. Now he calls himself God of Slaughter, and started a massacre in the Withered Wood Empire. The other one is a senior monk in Buddhism, known as the Living Buddha, Great Master Fa Cheng. It paused here as if it was recalling something before it added, Master Fa Cheng also claimed that he met a Buddha from the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss and was bestowed with supreme Dharma. Soon after, Master Fa Cheng set off alone for the Withered Wood Dynasty, where the sects flourished the most, to discuss Dharma with the Buddhists there. However, on the day he arrived at the capital of the Withered Wood Dynasty, someone discovered that Master Fa Cheng originated from a guest room in the largest glazed tile temple there. It was said that he died in an extremely strange manner. Half of his face was benevolent, while the other half was filled with resentment and hostility. Interesting. Go on. Lin Yuan raised his eyes slightly and looked at Flood Dragon 1 carefully. It seemed that this matter had caused quite a stir. Otherwise, even the cities that traded with the Sky Martial continent would not have received such news. However, Flood Dragon 1 had specially mentioned it, which meant that the repercussions of these two matters were not small. In fact, it could even threaten the northern region. After a moment of silence, Flood Dragon 1 continued. After Great Master Fa Cheng died, some people said that the glazed tile temple coveted the supreme Dharma and killed Great Master Fa Cheng to steal the scripture. Some people said that Great Master Fa Cheng had died long ago. According to the autopsy, Great Master Fa Cheng was already dead before he left. A bright light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. He claimed that he had seen a Buddha from the Western Pure Land and was bestowed with supreme Dharma. However, he died mysteriously before he left. In other words, if there was no problem with the autopsy, it meant that a corpse had walked from the temple to the Withered Wood Empire. Along the way he had seen many demonic beasts and cultivators. He even met with the senior monks of the Withered Wood Empire and was arranged to rest in a guest room before he died? Interesting. Very interesting. This was already related to his job. Moreover, of all places, why did Master Fa Cheng have to die in the Deadwood Dynasty? Was this related to the exalted celestial venerable of slaughter and salvation, who had also seen a true immortal? Then why didn't Empyrean Venerable Pudu die? Instead, he went on a killing spree in the Withered Wood Dynasty and no one dared to touch him? Although Lin Yuan was not a schemer, he did not doubt that the autopsy results would be problematic. After all, Master Fa Cheng was quite famous. He was a Dao initiation realm cultivator. In the current Jianghu continent he could be considered an immortal. He was not someone that Kongming and Tiangang dared to provoke. In addition, he had the backing of Buddhism. Even the guardians of the Heavenly Gate did not dare to touch Master Fa Cheng. A small glazed temple did not have the ability or the guts to do so. Moreover, this matter would directly affect the relationship between the Withered Wood Empire and Buddhism. Therefore, those who participated in the investigation were definitely the elites of the Withered Wood Empire. Since they had given out the results of the autopsy, it could only mean that this was the truth. They were not afraid of anyone finding fault with them at all. Otherwise, they would definitely wipe out the glazed tile temple directly instead of shielding them. Even if they coveted the supreme Dharma that Grandmaster Fa Cheng had brought over, they would not have shielded him. To be more precise, if they coveted the Dharma, they would have directly destroyed the glazed tile temple to silence them and cut off all clues. That way, even Buddhism could only investigate secretly and could not fall out with the Withered Wood Empire directly. Someone went to the temple where Master Fa Cheng had cultivated and found that there were corpses everywhere. According to the register, all the monks in the temple except for Master Fa Cheng were dead. However, the strange thing was that these corpses did not have a heartbeat, pulse, or aura. They were no different from ordinary people. They even maintained the movements they had when they were alive. This was also the reason why no one discovered them after all the monks in the temple died. If they had not investigated Master Fa Cheng's strange death, who knows when they would have been discovered. The embroidered uniform guards received information that the monks were holding all kinds of weapons and scriptures. Many of them had expressions of fear and anger on their faces. Therefore, it can be inferred that these monks were subduing the demon before they died. However, the demon's abilities were far beyond their imagination. Therefore, not only did they fail to subdue the demon, they were completely wiped out. All the monks died, including some who had rushed back to the temple after receiving the news. As First Flood Dragon spoke, he sucked in a breath of cold air. Master Fa Cheng was an eminent monk of Buddhism. He did not usually live on the Jianghu continent, but cultivated in a temple built on an immortal island overseas. Apart from the servants who did not have the aptitude for cultivation, The disciples in the temple were mostly the new generation of disciples who came out to travel. A temple that could cultivate Tao initiation realm cultivators obviously did not only have Master Fa Ching alone. After all, Master Fa Ching was not an abbot or an abbot. He was just an old monk with a higher seniority. To be able to silently destroy such a temple, how terrifying was the power of the demon? Cultivators above the Kongming realm would probably break out in cold sweat just thinking about it. This king knows about this. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said calmly, "Don't wait for the next transfer of goods. Contact the northern frontier directly and have them pay close attention to this matter. This king has a feeling that Master Fa Ching is definitely not simple." Coupled with the existence of the exalted celestial lord of slaughter, the Withered Wood dynasty will definitely not be peaceful in the following period of time. Also, keep an eye on the temple where Master Fa Ching came from. This king estimates that the corpses will not remain corpses forever. I'm afraid that there will be some kind of disaster. At this point, Lin Yuan took a deep breath. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his voice carried a hint of killing intent. Tell the Demon Emperor Council to start working. During this period of time, if anyone within sight of the northern frontier claims to have seen a true immortal, or Buddha, there is no need to observe. Regardless of whether it's true or not, kill them on the spot. This king does not wish for the northern frontier to be involved in this storm. Understand? Yes. First Flood Dragon nodded heavily and replied, "I'll do it right away." As the king of the gray-scaled Flood Dragon people, Lin Yuan had always respected First Flood Dragon. It was rare for him to use such a commanding tone. However, once he used such a tone, it meant that the matter was extremely serious and had to be done immediately. Chapter 1194. 2 hours later. Jiao Yi returned to the main hall where Lin Yuan was with an anxious look on his face. "Dragon King, something has happened," Jiao Yi said in a panicked voice with a grave expression. "When I contacted the northern frontier, the embroidered uniform guard sent me the latest news. Master Fa Cheng's corpse has come back to life. He was holding a funeral in the capital of the Deadwood dynasty." Master Fa Cheng, who was holding a funeral, suddenly kicked open the coffin and sat up. He was full of murderous aura and corpse aura, and he started a massacre at the funeral. All the high-level members of the Deadwood dynasty sects and the eminent monks of Buddhism who rushed over after hearing the news died at the hands of Master Fa Cheng. Moreover, according to the news from the Deadwood dynasty, Master Fa Cheng now calls himself the Cleansing Buddha, and has set up his own sect. He has gathered many evil cultivators and demonic cultivators. He and Heavenly Lord Pudu, who killed all lives, started a massacre in the Deadwood dynasty. Heavenly Lord Pudu, who killed all lives. Cleansing Buddha? Hearing this, Lin Yuan's thoughts raced, and a grave expression appeared in his eyes. After all, the titles of these two fellows did not sound good. Moreover, their actions made them seem like genuine demonic cultivators. Lin Yuan knew of a similar existence. The Nether River Patriarch in the Eldritch world was such an existence. He was known as the Killer of Heaven, Killer of Earth, and Killer of all lives. Compared to the cultivation methods of the Eldritch world, the Nether River Patriarch was undoubtedly an anomaly. However, this method of achieving Tao was more difficult. After all, if he wanted to become a saint of the Great Path, he had to kill all living beings in the world. The Nether River Patriarch appeared very early. It could be said that he had participated in the era of the Eldritch world's almighties. Achieving Tao through killing in that kind of environment? Not to mention top-notch mighty figures like Patriarch Yang Mei and Patriarch Hongjun, a Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva could directly crush him to death. However, with Patriarch Yang Mei guarding outside the Jianghu world and the rare treasure about to appear, Taoist Red Cloud and Tong Tian would not allow Patriarch Nether River to interfere at this time. Therefore, the possibility of Patriarch Nether River bewitching them was not high. Clearly, he was not the true immortal and Buddha that the heavenly venerate of slaughter and world-cleansing Buddha had mentioned. As for Hongjun, the old man was probably full of shit now. He had arranged for Baigon, GFA, Mosquito Daoran, Generals Hung and Ha to possess the Tianwu world. Otherwise, the Grand Supreme would not have become a saint of the Great Path right under his nose. If he still had the energy to meddle in other people's business, he would have been killed by Hongjun when the Grand Supreme destroyed his own saint of the heavenly path. Who else could it be, attacking the Withered Wood dynasty at such a time? All of a sudden Lin Yuan's face darkened. Someone was trying to sabotage him. Li Zhong had been carrying out the grand strategic plan he had deployed before. He did not even pay attention to the southern wasteland demon vein that was causing trouble. After eliminating all the possibilities, the remaining answer was obvious. Almost all the schemers would think that this was all planned by Lin Yuan. In addition, Lin Yuan had shown the power of the system before. At that time he had even killed many demon beasts in the Endless Sea. Therefore Lin Yuan was completely capable of creating true immortals and Buddhas. The northern frontier and the Withered Wood dynasty were still at the stage of border friction. It was not even a prelude, let alone a great war. At most it was just a prelude. However, when the heavenly venerate of slaughter and world-cleansing Buddha appeared, the situation changed completely. If Lin Yuan did not know that he was just an onlooker, he would have suspected that the northern frontier was trying to sabotage the Withered Wood dynasty. Motherf ****, Lin Yuan's blue-white eyes were overflowing with coldness. He cursed, "You dare to sabotage me? When I have the chance I will let you know what regret is." This kind of power that obviously did not belong to the Sky Martial world had appeared and was obviously targeting him. Lin Yuan did not even need to think to know that it was the Heavenly Court's group behind this. He estimated that the battle between them and the God-worshipping religion was almost over. Moreover, it seemed that the Heavenly Court had the upper hand. When the winter ended, the Outer Sea demon beasts would continue to send troops to deal with the dragon bloodline demon beasts. The purpose of this kind of thing at this time was to make the northern frontier be attacked from both sides. It would be even better if they could transfer Lin Yuan away from the Endless Sea. After all, during this period of time, Lin Yuan had commanded the new interest groups and made the Outer Sea demon beasts suffer a lot. However, even if those ambitious people suspected Lin Yuan, it was only a suspicion. Next, someone had to provide solid evidence to prove that this matter was caused by Lin Yuan. Otherwise, the northern frontier would not be in such a state of being attacked from both sides. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan said to Jiao Wan with a gloomy face, "Let Li Zhong keep a close eye on the Jiao clan. Also, let the Demon Emperor Association follow the evidence I left behind and quickly catch Zhang Xiu, Luo Su, Lei Fan and the others. Make it so detailed that they chewed a mouthful of rice several times. Once there is any strange movement, immediately arrange for the Blackwater Army to surround and kill them. No matter how many people die, make sure they can't do anything. Understand? Also, keep a close eye on Lei Qiuxing. I would rather kill the wrong person than let him go." Thinking about this, Lin Yuan felt a headache coming on. Now that there were too many talents gathered in the northern frontier, the problems that came with it were more and more. For example, the number of ambitious people in the northern frontier was constantly increasing. At the start, there was only Lei Fan. Later on, Jiao Wuing, Lei Qiuxing, and the others were just representatives. At this time, if anyone were to stab the northern frontier, they would be able to take over the Withered Wood Empire's territory and resources. Who knew how many people would be eager to try? Fortunately, the northern frontier still had the Demon Emperor Association, Imperial Secret Service, Yi Busho, and other secret service organizations. This allowed Lin Yuan to keep a close eye on these people. After giving such an order, Li Zhong would probably understand what he meant. At least for a short period of time, there would not be any obvious evidence that could be used against them in the northern frontier. This matter was not done by the northern frontier. Even if there was any evidence, it would be a false accusation. Damn it. He originally wanted to gnaw on the Withered Wood Empire, which was a tough bone to chew. He wanted to reduce the northern frontier's threat to the other factions by a large margin. When chaos arrived, he wanted to ensure that the northern frontier would not be kicked out prematurely. He wanted to preserve the strength to compete with the other empires. But what was going on now? First, he created 2 great demons to go on a rampage in the Withered Wood Empire for a while. Then, he waved his hand and ordered the northern frontier's army to set off and easily take over the Withered Wood Empire's territory? Wasn't this forcing the other empires to work together to deal with the northern frontier? Such a lame method. I'm afraid they are going to compete? At Literati Star. Lin Yuan took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Chapter 1195. What Lin Yuan didn't know was that, in the Shiqi dynasty on the other side of the Jianghu continent, GFA, who was wearing a white dragon-embroidered robe, overturned all the books on the table in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot. It was not too late for him to hear about what happened in the Withered Wood dynasty. After all, Shiqi also had the Phoenix Cry Guards. Although they were not as good as the northern region in terms of internal and external monitoring, None of the major events in the Jianghu continent could be hidden from the eyes of the Phoenix Cry Guards. Just like when Xian conquered the south and expanded his territory by more than 10 times, he only brought the old, weak, sick, disabled, and slaves back to the dynasty. Shiqi was the first to react and raise the banner to suppress the vassals of the Shang dynasty. If it weren't for the Phoenix Guards and the traitors of the Shang dynasty, even if Ji Chang and GFA were really wise, they wouldn't dare to directly challenge the ruler of the world at that time. Because doing so wouldn't be bravely challenging the evil dragon, but foolishly leading the whole family to die together. The appearance of the killer Pudu Tianzuan and the cleansing Buddha was obviously not the work of the Black Jiao. After all, GFA came to the Jianghu world many years earlier than Lin Yuan and had been secretly plotting and scheming. The only thing related to the untainted world was the name of the dynasty, Shiqi. But the world only remembered the glory of the great Zhou dynasty for 800 years. If it wasn't for the investiture of the gods, who would care about the Shiqi of the Phoenix Cry Shiqi? If the mortals didn't care, those high and mighty immortals wouldn't care. The more GFA observed the Black Jiao, the more he felt the terror of this opponent. Even when he was at an absolute disadvantage, the Black Flood Dragon still dared to go all out. In the end, he managed to establish a great foundation in the Northern Territory. He was also good at using the good and evil of human nature to control the many top-notch talents in the Northern Territory. He was top-notch in terms of strategy, wisdom, and even military accomplishments. His personality could be said to be steady without losing his boldness. If the Black Flood Dragon was not a demonic beast, GFA did not doubt that the other party would definitely be a human king. Thus, the matter of the Withered Wood dynasty most likely had nothing to do with the Black Serpent, because this matter was done too crudely. And it was too crude to use this matter to attack the Black Jiao in the northern frontier. Motherf *Ker. Wen Xing? I really overestimated you back then. GFA's handsome facial features were almost twisted together. His face was ashen as if he had just lost his loved one. While panting like a wild beast, GFA hissed, "Inform the spies we arranged in the northern frontier to evacuate as soon as possible. If they're already targeted, then don't move. No matter what happens in the outside world, they're not allowed to do anything before receiving my orders." Without a doubt, it was definitely Baigan who planned the matter of the Withered Wood dynasty. To the natives of the Sky Martial world, this might be a good move. After all, there were many existences in the Sky Martial world. They couldn't accurately distinguish the difference between the Heavenly Court and Lin Yuan, but they could still see that this power didn't belong to the Sky Martial world. In addition, the northern frontier was the enemy of the Withered Wood dynasty. It wasn't strange for them to suspect the Black Jiao. However, the Black Jiao wasn't completely ignorant of the Sky Martial world. If he could follow this train of thought and link it to the Heavenly Court and Baigan, that Black Flood Dragon would definitely not take the blame. Therefore, in the following period of time, the northern region would probably usher in another incomparably cruel massacre. After all, the natives of the Sky Martial world only suspected the northern frontier and the Black Jiao. In order to confirm this matter, someone had to stand up and give the other powers a suitable excuse to prove that the northern frontier was the mastermind. Therefore, to the Black Jiao, the easiest way to solve the current situation was to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. As long as the northern frontier didn't do anything, the other powers would only stop suspecting the northern frontier. In fact, if the northern frontier turned to do other things and the Withered Wood dynasty was heavily damaged, the other dynasties might set their eyes on the Withered Wood dynasty's territory. At that time, when the various powers fought, it would actually help the northern frontier. Just as he had thought, this job was done too crudely. If Baigan hadn't taken the initiative to discuss this matter with him, killing the Buddha and the Black Jiao wouldn't have been able to directly kill the northern frontier and the Black Jiao, but it would definitely have been able to severely injure them. It wouldn't have been like now. As long as the Black Jiao could withstand the current pressure, it would have helped the northern frontier to clean up the internal disharmony. Just like in the past, Baigan and his elder brother, who was born with a good appearance but had no shrewdness, tried to seduce Daji, who was Xian's virtuous helper. However, not only did they not get the result they deserved, but they also made Xian suspicious. As a result, Shiqi was not prepared to launch an attack. If it weren't for the help of the Rin school and the Chan school, they would have been killed by Xian. If he had done the same thing, he would never have tried to seduce Daji. Instead, he would have used the many traitors in the Yinshang dynasty to tarnish Daji's reputation first, and then let the important ministers denounce Daji. In this way, even if Xian knew that Daji was innocent, He had to remove Daji from the decision-making for the stability of the country. In an instant, DXN lost a great general, and he wouldn't get himself into trouble. To put it bluntly, Baigan coveted the political power that Daji represented, and his elder brother, who was made into meat soup, coveted Daji's beauty. The chemical effect of a lousy politician meeting a straw bag almost destroyed Shichi. Even if Shichi's reaction was fast, the eldest son of the Ji family couldn't escape the misfortune. The sage's body that his father had built for his whole life was also broken. Even if Yinshang was defeated, it didn't help. In the end, his father died of depression, leaving him a mess. Even the posthumous title of King Wen of Zhou was given to him by GFA after the destruction of Yinshang. After so many years, this Wen Chuxing didn't make any progress at all. No wonder he was a loser all his life. It was precisely because GFA knew the true level of Baigan's heart of 7 orifices that he did not care about Baigan's face and warned him. He did not expect Baigan to still do things his own way. While maintaining the cooperation with him, he also gave He Jiao a blow. Once again he played a good hand of cards to pieces. Every time he thought of the past, GFA would tremble with anger, and this time was no exception. Even at this time he calculated the old and new debts together. GFA's hatred and disgust for Baigan were no less than Lin Yuan's. Chapter 1196. In the Northern Frontier King's Mansion. After receiving Lin Yuan's instructions from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, Li Zhong's expression turned serious. He had no idea what had happened, but at the very least, close to 1 million cultivators had died in the Withered Wood Empire. Countless mortals had been dragged into the matter as well. If the two were added together, close to 100 million people would have died in just a few days. But to be honest, Li Zhong didn't take the Withered Wood dynasty's matter to heart. After all, the northern frontier itself was full of trouble, and he didn't have the time to care about other forces. Moreover, the 2 demons that had started a massacre in the Withered Wood dynasty were obviously not ordinary cultivators, and even Dao Initiation Realm cultivators had been killed. Unless the Dragon King personally faced the 2 demons in the northern frontier, once they left the northern frontier and lost the blessing of the northern frontier, Batu and Kagura wouldn't be their opponents. Naturally, they didn't have the qualifications to meddle in other people's business, so this trouble would be left to the Heavenly Gate Guardian to deal with. But Li Zhong didn't expect the Withered Wood dynasty's matter to be so big that even the Dragon King had sent back instructions. Li Zhong was terrified as he thought about it, and a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. After all, the Dragon King was very casual. Although he saw everything, he didn't ask about it whether it was good or bad. In these few months, he had really handed the huge northern frontier to him. Even if he purposely made some wrong decisions to test the waters, the Dragon King would at most give him a few words of advice, but he definitely wouldn't interfere with his decisions. Good Lord, he didn't even care about his own family's matters, but he was so concerned about his enemies' matters? However, this also indirectly proved that there was definitely a very deep water behind what happened in the Withered Tree dynasty. In fact, if the northern region continued to maintain this attitude of not caring about the matter and not caring about it, trouble would probably come to the northern region very soon. Lei Fan Luo Su, Zhang Xiu Lei Qiuxing? Li Zhong rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. He murmured, "What do these people have in common? They are all from the royal family. They are traitors, ambitious people? Does the Dragon King want me to keep an eye on the 4 of them, or on all the ambitious schemers?" Li Zhong would have just waved his hand if he had only targeted the few names that Lin Yuan had mentioned. However, there were too many ambitious schemers in the northern frontier, including Li Zhong himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have staked his future on the northern frontier when he had nothing in the northern frontier. It was obviously impossible to completely target all the ambitious schemers. Even if he could smoothly pass the order to the various spy agencies, without enough manpower, he wouldn't be able to achieve perfect results. However, to make a move against the Witherwood dynasty at this moment, this kind of action was no different from helping the northern frontier send out obstacles. No power would do such a stupid thing. So, although the mastermind behind the Witherwood dynasty was someone else, the cultivation world of the Sky Martial world subconsciously suspected that this matter was done by our northern frontier. Li Zhong's expression gradually became gloomy. He murmured, "No matter whether the northern frontier did this or not, as long as a member of the northern frontier came out to take over the Witherwood dynasty, this black pot would be directly placed on our northern frontier's head." Now what a good plan. So, is this what the Dragon King meant? Or is there another deeper meaning? Li Zhong suddenly missed his arrogant younger brother. If Li Xin was at the northern frontier, he would have most likely guessed the Dragon King's intention. He could only scratch his head and continue to think. After confirming that he didn't miss anything, he could then arrange the operation. At the same time, in the endless sea, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged in his palace. A hint of coldness flashed through his blue and white eyes. After a while, Lin Yuan slowly raised his head. His gaze swept outside the palace and he said in a deep voice, "Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign is here. This junior's humble abode is immediately illuminated by your presence." Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign, who appeared, coldly snorted. He swung his sleeve and said snappily, "If you don't know how to flatter, then don't. Who would be like you, saying this kind of words with a face full of killing intent?" Lin Yuan tilted his head and said with a faint smile, "If this junior's face is really full of killing intent, it can only mean that senior came to find me personally for no good reason. This junior is just showing his emotions on the surface." Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign cast a sidelong glance at Lin Yuan and said expressionlessly, "You're right. This time I didn't find you for any good reason. It's just that I was entrusted by someone, so I specially came to the Endless Sea to send you a message. I'm afraid that you will have to interfere in the Witherwood dynasty's matter even if you don't care." Lin Yuan? After a short moment of astonishment, Lin Yuan asked dumbfoundedly, "This? What do you mean?" Although the Witherwood dynasty's matter was originally a trap set for him, this work was really too rough. As long as he managed the ambitious people in the northern frontier well and didn't take up this task no matter what, the other party would be shooting himself in the foot. This time he might have to help the northern frontier get rid of many spies from other forces. Do you really think that Baigon's incense for so many years is for nothing? Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign rolled his eyes and casually pulled a chair to sit down. He said in a deep voice, "This work is really rough. But if you can think of the loopholes, Baigon himself naturally can think of it too. So he also considered what to do if you don't take up the task. Although he hasn't shown it on the surface, according to my investigation, I'm afraid that this time Baigon is going to trigger the Netherworld." Lin Yuan? For some reason Lin Yuan felt that Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign was fooling him. Trigger the Netherworld? Does the Netherworld really exist in the Tianwu world? Oh, I guess that you would have such an expression. Otherwise, why don't you say that you guys are existences from the ancient times and have good abilities in all aspects but lack all kinds of common knowledge? Do you really think that the Netherworld is the Netherworld and that it will only appear after opening up a tunnel and patching up the three realms? Then can you explain to me why there were already savage places like the Netherworld Blood Sea in the Untainted World before the Heavenly Court and the Underworld were built? Shangqing Heavenly Sovereign sat upright on the chair and said with a cold smile, "The so-called Netherworld exists in every world. But before the world was patched up, the Netherworld and the human world were connected. After the Underworld was built, the evil spirits in this world had a new home and slowly decreased. The so-called Netherworld is actually just a place to store negative energy. After a long time, these negative emotions will distort some space and form the so-called Netherworld impasse, such as the Netherworld Blood Sea and Fengdu Ancient City." Chapter 1197. Before the establishment of the Underworld, the Netherworld was connected to the human world. Lin Yuan did not deny this point. Before the establishment of the three underworlds, the human world could be said to be filled with demons and ghosts. East Peak, Mount Tai, and Fengdu could be considered as the disaster areas. Therefore, the establishment of Mount Tai and Fengdu Underworld was mainly to suppress these two ghost caves. The Underworld was established by Buddhism. For merit and incense, it took the initiative to go to the human world to capture wandering souls and send them into the cycle of reincarnation. However, they were only wandering souls and ghosts. Generally speaking, the Netherworld would avoid even the slightest bit of powerful existences. For example, zombies without souls could not be dealt with by the envoys of hell who could only capture and strike souls. Therefore they simply ignored them. If zombies appeared anywhere, the local chi practitioners would be the ones to deal with them. As for the more powerful ones that could be dealt with by mortal power, they were directly handed over to the thunder gods of the Heaven Court. However, what did this have to do with Lin Yuan? Could it be that if he did not care about the Withered Tree Empire, the three realms could not be repaired? Although Baigon had planned all of this, he was probably the only one who did not know what level he was at. Therefore, it was really unknown whether he could see the problems in his plan that was full of loopholes. You see, I told you that you wouldn't take my words seriously. You thought that I was just trying to be tactful with you, didn't you? Shangqing Heavenly Lord narrowed his eyes and smiled as he waved his hand and said, "Let me put it this way. Before Baigan took action, he first went to Hamba. In the name of a visit, he stole a trace of Hamba's original corpse energy. It was nothing to Hamba, but if this trace of corpse energy were to flow into the human world, I'm afraid it would instantly cause a huge disaster." Lin Yuan's gaze became dull. As long as it was a legend about zombies, no matter which version it was, Hamba was an ancestor-level existence. If Hamba's original corpse energy were to infect the human world, it was afraid that it would instantly turn an empire into a ghost world where zombies ran rampant. At most, only a small number of top cultivators or people with great luck would be able to survive. However, how did Baigan have the guts to provoke Hitorigami? Although Hongjun also had the bloodline of the human king, he was many generations inferior to the primogenitor. If this matter was blown out of proportion, even if Hamba couldn't kill the investiture of the gods in the Jianghu world, once this matter spread to the untainted world, any of the three sovereigns of the Red Cloud Cave would come out and kill a puny person. The heavenly court wouldn't have the guts to refuse, and Hongjun wouldn't fall out with the three sovereigns of the human race at this time. In any case, from Lin Yuan's point of view, Baigan was on a path of no return. However, compared to courting death, this matter was indeed a big deal. When he thought up to here, Lin Yuan's expression turned solemn, and he said in a low voice, "What you mean is that if I don't take over the Deadwood dynasty, then he's prepared to create a land of death that's filled with zombies to disgust me? It's even more serious than that." Shangqing Qinzuan narrowed his eyes slightly as if he thought of something interesting and said in a low voice, "If it's only a native of the Jianghu world, then it's really possible for him to do such a thing. However, Baigan is different. In any case, he's the literate star of the untainted heavenly court, an immortal who has seen the world. So, if he wants to do such a thing, he'll definitely choose to do it when the world is restored. At that time, the Deadwood dynasty will turn into a ghost region." Hearing this, Lin Yuan's expression immediately changed as if he had swallowed a fly. To be honest, the things that Baigan did didn't cause too much trouble, but they were extremely disgusting. If the Deadwood dynasty was classified as the Netherworld, then Lin Yuan, the god of the underworld, would have no choice but to hand it over. However, if at that time the Netherworld was filled with zombies, then even if Lin Yuan established the 6 paths of reincarnation, there would probably be countless ghost heroes who didn't want to be reincarnated. After all, there couldn't be any troublemakers. If there was one that couldn't be dealt with, then it would be like chives popping up one after another. As for zombies, it was indeed not something that the current Lin Yuan could casually deal with. Not to mention, the other party was a zombie that was infected by the corpse chi of the drought demon. He didn't dare to say that once a zombie transformed, it would become a great zombie king at the level of the unmetamorphosed skeleton, but it would definitely be at the level of a flying zombie. In addition, zombies didn't have a soul in the first place, and their bodies were incomparably tough. Once they reached a higher level, they would be harder to deal with. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said with a serious expression, "You mean I have to take over this matter? It's fine if you don't want to take it. I'm not forcing you. Anyway, I've already passed on the message. If you don't take it seriously, it has nothing to do with me." Shangqing Skylord smiled indifferently, then he stood up and walked out of the hall. After a while, he had disappeared without a trace. The hall once again returned to its loneliness. Lin Yuan then calmed down and began to think seriously. The trouble of the Deadwood dynasty was really troublesome. After all, things like Heavenly Venerate Skylord and Purifying World Buddha sounded very troublesome. In Lin Yuan's previous life, he had only heard of the White Lotus Society's Ajati matriarch, so he was very clear that these things were extremely troublesome. Moreover, he had to face their original bodies now. However, if he left them alone, the trouble would obviously become even bigger. After all, these two strange fellows were obviously much easier to deal with than the Deadwood dynasty that had fallen into a zombie kingdom. However, the problem was that the Heavenly Court and the Outer Sea demonic beasts couldn't wait for Lin Yuan to leave the Endless Sea. Without this terrifying opponent, they would be able to plan their next attack against the Dragon Bloodline demonic beast. Therefore, Lin Yuan definitely couldn't leave. Otherwise, when Lin Yuan returned next time, not to mention the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, even the City of Trade might be razed to the ground. However, if his original body couldn't leave the Endless Sea, the trouble of the Deadwood dynasty couldn't be solved by just anyone. They couldn't let the Northern Frontier Army enter the Deadwood dynasty wantonly to search, right? Then they probably wouldn't wait for the Heavenly Court to be repaired. They would probably directly release the original corpse gas of Hitorigami. Not only would the Deadwood dynasty turn into corpses, but even the Northern Frontier army that Lin Yuan sent in wouldn't be able to survive. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan silently contacted Jiao Yi with his divine thoughts and said in a deep voice, "Go and tell the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and tell Li Zhong to go to the back mountain of the Northern Frontier Academy to invite Qin Fang. No matter what heavenly venerate Skylord and purifying world Buddha are, I don't think there's anyone more suitable than this great scholar to deal with these demons and monsters. Even if they see a true immortal and Buddha in person, they won't be able to gain any advantage against the great righteousness." Chapter 1198. The Howran Yard of the Northern Frontier Academy could be said to be the most popular branch. After all, after entering the Howran Yard, one could at least be assigned a gathering place of about 350,000 people as his territory after graduation. After all, the cultivation methods of the Howran Yard were divided into self-cultivation, family unification, governance, and world peace. When in the academy, one had to cultivate self-cultivation, family unification, and cultivate the Great Spirit. Even if one had no cultivation, evil spirits and monsters could not hurt a Confucian scholar. After graduation, one had to begin to cultivate the way of governance, which was to govern a place. The more prosperous the place was, the more the Confucian scholar's cultivation would begin to improve. However, the unique transfer system of the Northern Frontier was still maintained. Firstly, it was to maintain the competitiveness among the Confucian scholars. The more outstanding one's achievements were, the better the place he would be assigned after his term ended. Then, the speed of cultivation would be further increased. Ordinary achievements would be transferred to a place of similar status. If one was idle during his term, he would be transferred to a poorer place. If there was no progress, he would directly enter the elimination of the weak stage. Secondly, it was to ensure that while the Northern Frontier flourished, there would not be one country within a country. After all, although a 6-year term was not long and was insignificant in the long life of a cultivator, there were so many people in the Northern Frontier. Most of the Confucian scholars might not be transferred back to the gathering place where they first served for half of their lives in the Northern Frontier. Moreover, every Howran Yard disciple would constantly fade the imprint left by the previous one during his term, ensuring that the Northern Frontier would follow the command of shunning city instead of becoming a separatist vassal state. However, although the disciples who entered Howran Courtyard were not few, those who walked out alive were not many. And most of these disciples who came out alive were in the self-cultivation realm or the family unification realm. Only Qin Fang had become a quasi-sage when he was studying in the Howran Yard. In other words, although he had not yet begun to cultivate the way of governance, he had already made 7 recommendations and 31 policies to improve various aspects of the Northern Frontier when he was in the Howran Yard. There were pros and cons, but most of the contents were adopted and highly approved by Li Zhong. In other words, when Qin Fang was studying in Howran Courtyard, he had already completed the accumulation of the stage of governing a country. However, there were pros and cons in this. It didn't mean that Qin Fang had some problems, but rather that there was a problem with his own theory. The Northern Frontier was currently governed by the Northern Frontier's laws. Other than Lin Yuan, there was no existence above the Northern Frontier's laws. Even Lin Yuan himself wouldn't attempt to violate the Northern Frontier's laws unless it was absolutely necessary. However, this typical rule by law was what the Confucians disliked the most. Even if Qin Fang hit the nail on the head with many of his problems, Li Zhong didn't adopt all of them. Instead, he adopted all the policies that negated the provisions of the laws. If Qin Fang completed, establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge for the past sages, and establishing peace for all ages, he would become a sage. Whether it was cultivating both civil and martial arts to become an unparalleled Confucian general, or using literature to move the world and establish order for the Northern Frontier, Qin Fang would be at the peak of quasi-sage and wouldn't be inferior to the top cultivators in the Jianghu world. Even in the untainted world, he would be at the beginning of the golden immortal realm. If he could complete both and influence enough people, Qin Fang might even directly become a sage and be conferred the title of a Confucian sage. He would be an existence that could compete with Chaos Daluo. However, such a person had been placed in the Northern Frontier Academy by Lin Yuan to teach the disciples of the Howran Yard. It wasn't that Lin Yuan didn't know that Qin Fang was a talent, but that he was afraid of Qin Fang. After all, the Confucianism of the northern region was completely different from the Confucianism of the Jianghu world. It was a mixture of the essence of the Confucianism of Lin Yuan's previous life. After abandoning the behavior of the Confucianism of the northern region, which required others to follow the teachings of the Confucian sage, the style of the Confucianism of the northern region was several levels higher. The Confucianism of the northern region could really achieve the existence of everyone is responsible for the prosperity of the world. However, the Confucians, Lin Yuan really didn't know how to evaluate them. The Confucians had produced many sages and great people, but during the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, it was an indisputable fact that whoever used the Confucians would perish. After all, the Confucians believed that human nature was inherently good, and they wanted to replace the rule of law with the rule of man. In other words, the Confucians only believed in human nature, but any intelligent creature had a deep-rooted evil nature. Compared to the Confucians, Lin Yuan was closer to the legalists, saying that human nature was inherently evil. The disciples of the Confucians had always been a double-edged sword. If used well, the world would be peaceful, but if there was a problem, the Confucians would give birth to countless existences that could cause chaos in the world. After all, not everyone could become a sage, and even less everyone wanted to become a sage. In addition, the existence of Qin Fang has a great restraining effect on demons and monsters, and Lin Yuan is obviously one of them. If Qin Fang left the Haoran courtyard to do as he pleased, Lin Yuan guessed that he might one day suffer a setback because of Qin Fang. However, the problem was that Lin Yuan had already been forced to this point. He had to either leave the Endless Sea and go to the Withered Wood dynasty to meet the Heavenly Court's Pudu Exalted Celestial and the Cleansing World Buddha, or he had to let Qin Fang go to the Withered Wood dynasty. At that time, the two tigers would fight and there would be an opportunity for the northern frontier. However, everything had to be done quickly, or he would have to face either a zombie nation or a dynasty filled with Confucians. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan took a deep breath and murmured, "I don't know how long this cold winter will freeze the Endless Sea." The climate of the Jianghu world was actually not extreme. Even if there was a blizzard, it would not freeze the entire Endless Sea. Otherwise, the outer sea demon beasts would not have chosen this time to attack the deep sea. After all, the dragon race was the dragon race. Their upper limit and potential were much higher than the natives of the Jianghu world. The reason why the outer sea demon beasts were able to suppress the dragon bloodline demon beasts was because the dragon bloodline demon beasts were not on good terms. Not only were there two large factions, the Sea Demon Guild and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, but even the Sea Demon clans were not obedient. Secondly, the internal friction in the Endless Sea was too severe. Coupled with the fact that they had been ruthlessly beaten by the Great Old Ones, the various Sea Demon clans and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had suffered heavy losses. Therefore, during this period of time, the outer Sea Demon Beasts' overall strength was above the Dragon Bloodline Demon Beasts. However, with enough time, the Dragon Bloodline Demon Beast's recovery speed was much more terrifying than the Outer Sea Demon Beasts. If they had predicted that the Endless Sea would be frozen by this winter, the Outer Sea Demon Beasts would probably have continued to wait for an opportunity instead of choosing this time to start a war with the Dragon Bloodline Demon Beasts. "I'm afraid it will take a long time." A calm voice rang out. Shortly after, Ying Zai appeared in front of Lin Yuan's palace, surrounded by a group of gray-scaled flood dragon people. Chapter 1199. Looking at the gray-scaled flood dragon people, Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. Perhaps Ying Zai was not as powerful as the Shangqing Heavenly Exalted Celestial and could not move freely in the Endless Sea. However, Ying Zai was still an ancestral demon and could be considered one of the peak experts in the Jianghu world. If Ying Zai wanted to break into the City of Trade, he wouldn't need to spend much effort. After all, there was a one-way teleportation formation in the City of Trade. Most of the defensive facilities in the City of Trade were for the inside and not the outside. Even if an army came in through the teleportation formation, they would have to take down the outer walls first. The difficulty of that was no less than attacking from the outside. However, for an expert like Ying Zai, as long as he entered the Endless Sea, wouldn't it be easy to break into Lin Yuan's palace? Ying Zai probably didn't have much evil intentions. Otherwise, these gray-scaled flood dragon people would have suffered heavy casualties. How could they still surround Ying Zai? If that's the case, freezing the Endless Sea is your gods worshipping cult's doing? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and swam up from the cushion. He sized up Ying Zai expressionlessly. Ying Zai laughed and said in a clear voice, "Shallow means not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning." Speaking till here, Zai took a deep breath. His eyes were overflowing with cold light. He continued to speak loudly, I have no choice but to visit you. I hope that Dragon King can forgive me. All right. After Zai finished speaking, Lin Yuan already understood. God's worshipping cult probably couldn't win against the heavenly court and had been kicked out of the game. It was hard to say how the variant humans were doing. The outer sea's demonic beasts were definitely in the hands of the heavenly court. Otherwise, the Withered Wood Empire wouldn't have, coincidentally, erupted. The main reason was that the heavenly court had suffered too much in his hands. They wanted to lure him out of the endless sea and take advantage of the situation to wipe out the dragon race of the four seas. After all, no matter how powerful Lin Yuan was, the endless sea wasn't his territory. He couldn't leave behind many trump cards to deal with the heavenly court. However, Zai wasn't someone to be trifled with. He used some secret method and paid a huge price to freeze the endless sea, causing the heavenly court's following plans to go to waste. It could be said that he was taking drastic measures and was extremely ruthless. Could it be that there was such a deliberate ice seal? He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said with a bitter smile, Dragon King, there's no need to be so surprised. Although we've cast a spell to stop the monster beasts from making their next move, it's still just a small trick. It won't be long before the heavenly court can break our spell. But what's strange is that according to our calculations, the heavenly court should have been able to unseal the endless sea a long time ago, but they haven't done anything yet. So, I guess that they must have other plans and that's why they've taken the liberty to visit us. Alright, I got it. Lin Yuan replied indifferently. However, in his heart, he once again revealed a look of disdain towards this literati star. He was indeed a wise literati star. Every step he took was calculated, but not a single one of them was correct. This was also a kind of ability. Now that the endless sea was frozen, the monster beasts from the outer sea would definitely be unable to attack the dragon bloodline monsters. If Lin Yuan took advantage of this time to leave the endless sea and go to the Withered Wood dynasty to solve the problem of the corpse chi of the drought demon, then the endless sea would be unsealed as soon as Lin Yuan left. Although they didn't dare to say that they could destroy the dragon clan of the four seas before Lin Yuan returned, they could at least guarantee that the dragon bloodline monsters would be completely destroyed before Lin Yuan returned. At that time, even if Lin Yuan rushed back, he would be powerless in front of the rolling tide. But the problem was, would Lin Yuan be so stupid? Would he ignore the dragon bloodline monsters and go to deal with the problem of the Withered Wood dynasty first? This was not looking down on Lin Yuan's foresight and vision, but completely treating Lin Yuan as a lone wolf. Zai took a deep breath, still maintaining his cupped hands posture, and said in a deep voice, Dragon King, although my words may make you a little unhappy, the manpower that the heavenly court has invested this time has far exceeded our previous expectations. The two brothers Yin Jiao and Yin Hong are just the vanguard, so I think that you need our help. This time Lin Yuan didn't answer directly, but looked at Zai meaningfully. Lin Yuan didn't know who was behind the god worship sect, but at present he could infer that Zai was related to Zheng. Moreover, the Qin state at that time didn't give the Qi practitioners any space in terms of religion. For example, the famous burning books and burying Confucians incident was referring to Zheng's massacre of the otherworldly people and necromancers in the Qin state. However, it wasn't a problem to call it burning books and burying Confucians. After all, the Confucians of that era didn't all refer to the Confucians. These Confucians usually looked like scholars, but they could suddenly turn into Qi practitioners. Those who didn't know the inside story would naturally think that Zheng was burying the Confucians. Looking at the history of his previous life, any human king who could leave his name in history and wasn't praised by the Confucians seemed to be in existence that couldn't live under the same sky with these Qi practitioners. But it was normal. After all, the grudge was formed during the period of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. Although the Son of Heaven and the human king referred to the same profession, they were like fire and water. The Yin clan would never mix with the heavenly court. Not to mention the heavenly court, even Qi practitioners were something that could bring disaster to the country and the people in the eyes of the Yin clan. But there was nothing absolute in the world. Just like when Lin Yuan met Yu Jiang, didn't they also change to the Western sect? In a situation where one wrong step could lead to death, no one was worthy of trust. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said in a deep voice, I wonder who this we refers to. Zai took a deep breath and said with a smile, Dragon King, when you heard the words God worship sect, what was your first reaction? God worship sect? God. No. The concept of God was proposed by Hongjun after Hao Yin established the heavenly court. In the beginning, the untainted world was called God and Devil. The top experts born in the untainted world were never divided into God and Devil. Although they were more powerful, they didn't need to be divided into factions, and they didn't need to accept the worship of the world. Instead, they did what they wanted to do. The concept of God worship sect at first referred to totems. When the human race struggled to survive in the untainted world, they had to worship powerful untainted world creatures and carve the characteristics or appearances of those untainted world creatures on stone tablets and animal skins to ensure that other untainted world creatures wouldn't dare to attack them at will. These were the first totems. Compared to the later immortals who only accepted incense and protected their followers depending on their mood, totems were much more dedicated. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.